Good call.
Go to the podium and start. Do you know the words? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well done. Can I ask the city clerk to have a roll call?
Vice Mayor Harvey. Councilmember
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Agrimonti. Here. Councilmember Hundley.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Mayor Harrington.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. And now for approval of, there's been no closed session, so there's nothing to report. And now for the approval of the agenda. If anyone has any changes to the agenda, please say so now. Otherwise, I'll take a motion. Motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
And now we'll have public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone and begin by stating and spelling your name. Hi, Ken.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street, Sonoma, the last house in the city limits of Sonoma. This past Saturday, my wife Jewel had a cannabis seminar for seniors and their caregivers at Sonoma Valley Library, a fantastic place to have a meeting. And it was completely standing room only. Dr. Marilyn Holter was the presenter, and she is excellent and very experienced and willing to answer questions and just be available for the patients that came to see her. Coming up on March 12th at Hot Monk, 3 o'clock, the Sonoma Valley Cannabis Enthusiasts will be having a meeting. Tim Ricard, the Cannabis Program Manager for Sonoma County, will be the featured speaker, and you're all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Taylor Moyeda. I'm a Community Services Officer with the Sonoma Police Department. I just wanted to invite everyone to our Coffee with a Cop event that's going to be happening on March 16th at Scandia Bakery. So it'll be from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll bring out some of the local deputies from the Valley Substation, as well as our local officers here as well. We'll be there to chat and get to know our residents, and you guys can get to know us as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
March 16th.
Hi, my name's Donna, and maybe I'm just trying to educate myself, but I got a notice from 350 Sonoma that Sebastopol.
Donna, could you give your last name as well?
Warshaw.
Thanks.
And the notice from 350 Sonoma mentions that Sebastopol City Council tomorrow is hopefully going to adopt a styrofoam ban. And I looked up what Sonoma has, and we have a ban on any city property that's rented out. They can't use styrofoam there, but it sounds like Sebastopol's going all the way, and that sounded good, and I didn't know if we all had anything in the works for that. I researched a little further, and I found out that California lawmakers propose phasing out products that aren't recyclable, but that might not happen till 2030. So cities are chipping away at it, and that's all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Seeing no one come forward to the podium, I'll close public comment. And now,
Could I ask, I'm sorry.
Oh, go
Could I
ahead.
ask our city manager, there was something given to the city manager about polystyrene cups, and I think there was a sample ordinance that other cities are taking a look at. We haven't addressed it yet, but we certainly have it on.
Yeah, so this is one of the city council has a community services environment commission, and the CSCC has a subgroup looking at a variety of different kind of recycling pieces. So I believe that these are some items that the commission is looking at, and then would maybe coming back forward to council.
Thank you. And now for meeting dedications, I'd like to make the first one, but if anyone else wants to make one after that, that'd be fine. I'd like to dedicate this meeting to Jerry Marino. He passed away recently, and we had the opportunity to celebrate Jerry and his life shortly prior to his death in these chambers, and so I'd just like to recognize him again. Are there any other dedications?
I have two. One, a young woman, single mother, has two children. College children, just going into college, Bridget and Maria Vanoni. The mother's name is Karen Leslie Kelly Vanoni. She leaves behind her two daughters, her mother and stepfather, Karen and Fred Thompson. She passed away on 2/26. She was 53. She fought cancer valiantly for 10 years. She lived in Sonoma, had a wonderful job. She was a tech person, traveled all over the world, did a wonderful job as a single mother, but she lost her fight to cancer. We have another woman, different type of a woman from the Women's Club. Her name is Barbara Jean Miller. She is a twin. Her sister's name is Joanne, and they call her Jo. And they actually called Jean the sister, well, no one knew her as Barbara, it was always Jean. And before women were probably graduating from Stanford, they both graduated, they were twins at 1959 from Stanford, which I think is wonderful. She was in her late 80s, and she leaves behind her sister Joanne Miller and her brother Duke, her brother Duke and sister-in-law Janine. She passed away on February 26th. Patricia Cullinan called to remind me that she was also one of the board members from Sonoma Valley Historical Society, as well as from the Sonoma Valley Women's Club, and she actually did develop the Sonoma Valley Women's Club Foundation because she realized the Women's Club needed to move forward. So these are two valiant women who have lost both to cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Agrimonti. Oh, we're not taking public comment on this, Ken. Oh, do you?
A really good man, Wally Brightman, a mainstay at KSVY radio station, passed away, and his funeral is the 13th at 11 o'clock at St. Francis. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to presentations. And our first one is a great one. It's our Celebrate Sonoma program, where we recognize the people that make up the fabric of the town and are contributing to making it so wonderful to live here. And I will turn it over to Councilmember Hundley to recognize the person she's selected.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington. A few introductory comments. In the 2 weeks that I've been collecting information about our special guest tonight, I've learned a few things. The first is that whether it's from helping or inspiring, it would be hard to find someone in Sonoma Valley that Renea Magnani has not affected. The second is that she is very much loved by her family, friends, and neighbors, and students, and so many others that have had the good fortune of experiencing her compassion and generosity. And the third is that she is very appreciated. And the most prevalent response I've seen or heard is that no one deserves to be recognized and honored more than Renea. So with that, I would like to invite Renea to meet me up front by the podium for a few things. No? Yes. All right. So I would like to begin by quoting your own words back to you that I saw on Facebook. I believe we can all do so much more with what we think we can, and it's just a matter of where we place our priorities. Each of us does what we can, when we can, with what we have, where and when we can. And I can tell that these are words that you live by. So I've been doing a lot of intel on you, and I've enjoyed this, getting to talk to people who have known you your entire life. A lot of elementary school friends, actually. And I've learned that, whether it's meeting a family who you notice doesn't have great shoes, and you send a friend off to come and meet and bring the family new shoes so it's not something they have to worry about anymore. Or making sure your students have eyeglasses or dental care or school supplies or groceries, all while instilling in them a love of learning. Or it's stepping up to lead the Valley of the Moon Teachers Association and advocating for your fellow teachers. And you live by those words by using your own front porch, which some have called the trading post. But it's also a place where you collect things that you find out people need so that you can deliver them to those that need them. So some of the words that people have used to describe you include dogged, loyal, honest, genuinely kind, and a straight shooter. And I've also heard that underneath your heroic acts of kindness, I'm told that you are a master delegator and an expert at time management. And so I've had several conversations, wondering how it is that you do all that you do, and they credit to your delegation and time management skills. So I find that inspiring. When you recruit others, you are very precise in your requests. I know that you keep lists, and you like to make sure people get exactly what they need. And when you ask people to do things for you, they are willing to do it because they trust you, and they know that your requests are genuine. And you embody the very best of Sonoma, and you love your hometown, and it's obvious by all that you do. And people who have known you the longest tell me you've been like this your whole life. Perhaps at least a few of these traits you inherited from your mother. And you live by the mantra of doing what you can, when you can, with what you have, where and when you can. And that is why we honor you tonight. So before the mayor is going to give the official presentation, I have something to give you. And do you have any family members with you tonight? If you would come and join Renee up here for the presentation. Dad. Come on, Dad. And maybe you could introduce.
Oh, okay, this is my father, Ron Church, who I am proud to say was born and raised in Sonoma as well as I, and my husband, Damien Magnani, who also was born and raised in Sonoma.
Shauna Davis, who is on a plane to Paris right now, so I hate her a little bit. Otherwise, she would be here, has helped me with this. And the fires in 2017 were proof that the worst of times can bring out the best in us. And I talked to one of your friends who lost her home and told me that everything she has is because of you today. And I know that on that very first terrible day, you were out there making sure people had all the essentials they need to get through the first week. And as people began to rebuild their lives, no detail was too small for you to think of. And I was the mayor of Sonoma that year. You're making me cry. During that very difficult time, and the reason that I wanted to give the presentation to you today was because I know that it was because of people like you that helped us get through it all together. So one of the things that you did with your school that sustained some damage, right as you guys were finishing building, you, after the campfires, had a Stars of Hope project to send stars to the victims of the campfire. And so I have a star, and it is for you. And I just want to say thank you so much. And I hear that you have a lot to do with being her partner, and I'm sure I can credit you with many things as well. So with that, I will pass this over to the mayor to finish our presentation.
Thank you. And so the recognition it's a certificate of recognition making it your day on March 10th, 2019 in the city of Sonoma. And forever forward, that will be your day in the city of Sonoma. And we're so pleased to have you here and honor you tonight. Now, we do have a full agenda, but we have about 10 minutes if anybody wanted to make a comment about this, or if you wanted to say a few words, you could start over there.
Like me? Okay. I will just say thank you to everyone. It is it is my true honor to serve my community in the ways that I do, and to have so many people who are willing and able to step forward from the smallest to the greatest acts. And I don't do it by myself. I get a lot of credit for things, but it absolutely takes every person who's willing to secure the shoes or the backpack, or to drive the bed across town, or to whatever that is needed. So thank you, everyone who helps me to do what I do to help us all.
Thank you. So if anybody wants to make comments, we have about 10 minutes, and then afterwards, everyone who's here for this item, we'd like to take a photo together, if we can.
Well, from my own experience, Renea is my immediate neighbor across the street from our house. She and her family are excellent neighbors. And so to you, Renea, hey, neighbor.
All right.
My name is Karen O'Hara. I am a Sonoma native. Grew up with Renee through the schools here. Now I'm also a teacher at Dunbar with Renee. She's been a teaching partner with me for 7-8 years now. I've had the honor of being her teaching partner, her teaching my children, my son, and I got the privilege to teach one of her daughters. So we've been incredibly close throughout these years, or even closer. And what you have said is just everything nailed. Anytime a student was sick or in need, her heart just opens up. I don't know where that comes from, but her heart is bigger than a heart I've ever known. She's willing to just help out with anything without batting an eye. And I can't get over it. You need something, she knows somebody. She knows somebody. You need a new flag for the flagpole, she knows somebody. Somebody needs new shoes, she knows somebody. And so that 6 degrees of separation with Renee, it's probably only one here in this town. So again, I don't know where you get that love, but I love that I get to have a part of that, and it's contagious. So thank you, Renee.
My name is Britta Johnson, and I first knew about Renee. She was like a nanny for a local family, working her way through school to get her teaching degree, which was really impressive, right? And then she was my oldest's first grade teacher, which was awesome. And I was sad because she actually had to move over to Dunbar because, you know, the schools that we have sort of this sometimes flux of people back and forth. And so it was great to hear when she came back to Sonoma schools. And then I've had occasion to do projects with Renee and work with Renee as a mom, because she has daughters who are not far from my daughter's age, which is really cool. And then now I'm on the Sonoma Valley Unified School Board, and she is the VMTA Teachers Union president. And I just want to say that we all really appreciate Renee's work every day and all the different things that she does. And it's hard work, and we're glad and grateful to be able to do it together. So thanks.
I've had the pleasure of working with Renee for at least 15 years, all the way back to Relay for Life. we work together there, and we've done bell-bottom bashes with Kat and I, and we're still working together. I've adopted her as my little sister, so we just very close, very tight. We don't see each other that often, but we always talk on Facebook like everybody else does. So when we're still working together, and I'm just gonna plug a little bit this Saturday night at the Sonoma Valley Women's Club, which is a great place. We'll be doing a fundraiser for the Sonoma Valley High School seniors, my alumni and my wife's alumni, and it's from 7 to 10 this Saturday night, and Renee will be there with her girls, selling treats, pizza, so they can go on their trips, and the proceeds will go to Sonoma Valley Women's Club and the Sonoma Valley High School, and backtracks will be playing. So,
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more. Is Helena here? And Renee, maybe could you come back up? Oh.
Gosh, where do you start with Renee? So I'm the person who lost their home in Glen Ellen during the fires. And I was staying with a friend of mine in Sonoma. And when I found out, I'd sent Renee a text. And within 1 hour, she calls me and said, are you going to be there in 10 minutes? Somebody's going to be there. Literally. It's right after I found out I lost everything. And this beautiful blonde woman shows up at my door with a basket with shampoo, a toothbrush, toothpaste, a hairbrush, everything that you need just for the moment. And 2 envelopes with Safeway gift cards to the tune of $250 each. So I was unable to go to Safeway and get makeup and all the things that we need, all our favorite little things. And I just at that moment knew that I was going to be okay. And that's just the beginning. From that moment on, everything I have, from my clothing to the articles in my closet with Pepto-Bismol, all the little things that you don't even think about that are gone, but everything was gone. So you have to replace everything. By about the 5-month mark, I think, I was in a gorgeous brand new home that was just built. It is on Harrington Street, which is a very desirable place to live, backs up against a beautiful view. I didn't have a job. I'm an artist. I couldn't show income. I have rotten credit. And because Renee referred me to this place, I got to move in. Yay! So I live in this beautiful home, and I have absolutely everything I need within a 5-month period of time, all because of Renee. She either made a call or referred me to someone or showed up at my door and said, I was just in the neighborhood, you need this big gigantic thing of toilet paper and paper towels, or do you need any cash for gas? It was absolutely everything. And the last that I received from her was just last year in September, which was a check for $1,000 that came from, what is the gentleman's name at this group from Sonoma? Sonoma Sons. Native Sons of Sonoma, I'm sorry. Yeah, and it was just consistent from the fires to that period of time. There was just no break. So I just attribute everything that I have to you. And the most amazing thing she did was at Christmas time, right after the fires, she had some connections with a school in San Francisco, which was a private school, an all-boys school. And she had the kindergarten class adopt me. And so she had me do an Amazon wish list, and then the kids and the parents could buy, the little things off of the wish list, which are things that I needed, right, from the printer, my printer, to my bed, to the clock in my kitchen. But the best thing that I received, and I think I'm the only fire survivor that has one of these ever, was this amazing drawing from the kindergarten class that came with some of my objects. And it says, sorry that your house burnt down. And then the house, cherished forever. And each one of them also, because they knew that I had lost everything, made me a Christmas ornament by hand. So I have about 30 of them, all with the construction paper and the glitter, and they put little pictures of my dogs and everything on it. It's just absolutely amazing. So I can't say enough, because I don't know where I would be if you weren't the first person I met when I moved here in 2011. Because I mean, I just attribute it all to you. Yeah. There's a couple of people who couldn't make it, who I got just a little tidbit of info. Can I?
You know, we actually have to keep going with our meeting, but with that, I would like to ask the council if they want to make any quick comments, and then we can take our photo.
That was amazing, and I don't want to try to upstage that, but I do want to say something. I had the opportunity to meet with Renee right after I got elected to council, and it was just amazing to me how much you cared about this community and how hard you wanted to fight for this community and how much you care about the teachers that you represent. And it really speaks to me how important teachers are and community leaders like yourself are. They're really the fabric that knit us together. And these are the people that know the parents, they know the kids, they know the community, they know what's needed and when it's needed and where the help should go. And I just think this community is so blessed to have you and people like you in it that contribute so much. And thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, I know Renee through having children, but and also everyone knows about Renee around town. And I just want to say it's really our privilege as a council to be able to recognize you here tonight, because you know, the best part about Sonoma is the people here, and there's just incredible people that never ask for recognition and do it because it feels good to be helpful. And I just think that being able to live in a town with great people like you is just, you know, it's a real blessing for all of us. So thank you for everything you do. And I'm so glad that we were able to have you here tonight, and that you're here with, you know, all the people that also really enjoy the opportunity to recognize all the good work you're doing. Thank you.
I'm just amazed, you know, with the things that you do. So I personally, as the president of the Foundation for the Women's Club, I'm gonna ask if they will make you an honorary member, because we took the cows and the pavilion / jail off the plaza during the turn of the century, as well as brought the library here, all things like that. And you're the kind of woman that is a role model for all of our younger members. So I just wanted to say that we will do that.
Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you. I'll see you soon.
And now if everybody who's here for Renee wants to come forward, we can take a photo with the council.
Stop.
All right. Say Renee. 1, 2, 3. Renee. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. That was really wonderful, and thank you, Councilmember Hundley, for making such a great presentation and bringing Renee here. Our next item, item 3.2, is an update from the chief of police. And one of the reasons we want to have this update, of course, is there's been some talk about the amount of policing in the town of Sonoma overnight and sort of what's going on. There was a rash of car burglaries and things like that. And so I will turn it over to Chief Rodriguez to give us an update on the state of policing in Sonoma. City Manager, do you have additional comments?
Just a brief to add on to that, Mayor Harrington. I also want to introduce Captain Jim Noggle, who is here as well, and be making part of the presentation. And the city is fortunate to have had a contract with the Sheriff's Department for 15 years, providing dedicated service to our community. And so I'd like to turn it to Chief Orlando to provide the update that the mayor described. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Harvey and council members and city manager and everyone here today. Can you believe it's been 8 months? It just went by pretty fast, but I'm happy to be here and just want to tell everyone here that we live in a safe community. Sonoma is a safe community. One of the questions that I was asked when I interviewed for chief of police was, what do you know about Sonoma? And we just witnessed it today, is that everybody comes out and helps everyone. When I drove a patrol car here as a deputy, people would wave and they would show you all their fingers when they're waving. So it was an eye opener, believe me, coming here to Sonoma. And our deputies who work here in the city and the deputies that work out in the valley love coming and working here because of that. So we're here today to talk about staffing levels, about where Sonoma fits. And that's why today I brought Captain Jim Noggle, who's our captain in charge of all patrol services, and he's going to give you a quick review of where Sonoma stands in the staffing levels area. Captain.
All right, hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and talk to you guys, because I don't have an opportunity to come and talk to you guys very much all the way over here, because I'm stationed out of the main office, so it's nice to meet you guys face to face and put faces with names and stuff. So I do appreciate that. And I also brought with me our Administrative Services Director, Connie Newton. So she's basically oversees all the budget stuff for the Sheriff's Office, just to kind of be here and let you guys see and meet her as well. So I thank you for that. And so, my name is Jim Noggle. I'm what they call the Field Services Captain for the Sheriff's Office, and that's basically all of operations. And part of our operations is the Sonoma Police Department. So that's why I'm going to come here and talk to you guys today a little bit. And is this going to work? On, then button. Okay, so some of the things I just want to do is we want to give you just a general overview of where Sonoma Police Department sits, and then kind of clean up or explain the relationship between the Sonoma Police Department and the Sheriff's Department. And then I'm going to invite Chief Rodriguez is going to come back up and just kind of talk to you guys about some current stats and trends and stuff, and then some recent cases that have gone down here out in the Sonoma Valley. So the first thing I got in here, this is a geographical map, and it's basically most of Sonoma County area we go. It goes quite a bit more west to the coast and then north all the way up to the Mendocino County line. But the area I want to focus you guys in on is this area here. So the brown area around that square is what we refer to as the Sonoma Valley, and that's serviced by the Valley Substation. That little square in the center, obviously, is the city of Sonoma, and that is obviously you guys. So when you hear people talking about the county or the valley, that would be the outside area, and then when we talk about Sonoma, we're talking about the city of Sonoma. This right here is your current organizational chart, basically, or what your staffing levels are for the city of Sonoma. You currently have a police chief, 2 sergeants, a total of 10 deputies, and a share of a a school resource officer, and 2 community service officers, and some support. Also, what you guys get in addition to that is all the other additional resources that are available, and those are the ones that basically come out of the main office in Santa Rosa. So you can see the list of things there. You get dispatch records, detective bureau, our helicopter, and all those things are in support of the operations out here in one way or another. And this chart is a lot bigger, and the reason I'm showing this one is to kind of explain why I'm here today, because this is the Sheriff's Office. So this is everything that is included in the Sheriff's Office and Sheriff's Office operations. And then if you see the middle, you see the sheriff corner at the top, right down that middle column to the left is field services. And that's what I'm in charge of. And you'll see in that row that Sonoma Police Department falls under there as well. And this is significant because when we talk about budget cuts to the sheriff's office, we're talking about the entire sheriff's office, that entire organization. And the unique position you guys are in is that budget talks at the sheriff's office level don't really affect you guys in a negative way at all, because your service levels are dictated by the contract. So, you know, when you guys reach your contract and you set your own service levels, well, those get filled first. So when I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to allocate my resources and where to put people, the first thing I have to do is I've got to fill the Sonoma contract, I have to fill the Windsor contract, and then I figure out where all the other pieces go. So when we hear about, you know, positions cut or things like that, it's across the organization and not necessarily Sonoma PD. Unless, of course, you guys decide to adjust your own budgets and adjust your own staffing levels. It's really dictated by you guys and what kind of services you agree to. So, you know, we maintain the staffing levels here, and that's the priority one for you guys. And so this slide here, what I also want to show is not only do you have the support of your own police department, but also comes with it, these are all agencies, law enforcement agencies in the area that really can respond within minutes. You know, some several minutes, but some very quickly. So when we have big events that happen here in Sonoma, you have support from the Valley Substation deputies, you have support, you know, there's fish and game wardens here, Petaluma Police Department, Napa, they all come in. And you guys have had a couple incidents out here the last couple of years where you saw that firsthand. You know, the shooting down at the car wash where, you know, within a relatively quick amount of time, you can have a lot of resources here to help you. And this list is a short list because it doesn't include the mutual aid that we have access to. I'm sure you guys all recognize in the fires, you saw agencies from really far away coming in to help. And that's a different mechanism. That's when we have disasters and things that are going to last a long time. And that's when all those resources come in and are available to you guys. And so on this slide, I'm going to have Chief Rodriguez come up and talk about some current crime trends and stuff like that. I do have to apologize for one thing. I typically have a rule that I will stick around as long as needed. However, it is my little guy's 11th birthday today, so when we're done, I'm going to split. But what I want to say is both Kathy and the chief know how to get a hold of me. You know, if there's any time you guys want to set up meetings or whatever to go deeper into things, I'm more than willing to talk to you guys and stuff. So, you know, this is just kind of an introduction more than anything. But yeah, so I'll invite the chief back up.
Thank you, Captain Noggle. So here we have a chart of the crime trends since 2014. And as you can see that we haven't had any homicides, so we're going to try to keep it that way. The aggravated assaults went up this year, but it's kind of an average overall if you look through all the years. 2017 was the year of the fires. And during about a month and a half, we had about 60 cops patrolling Sonoma and the Valley. So we were definitely, everybody was just, you know, pinned down because of the fires. So pretty much when you see it, the stats here, you'll see that everything's pretty much in the same trend. The calls for service have kind of remained the same. And of course, we are working on that gate over right across the street here on the Vets building, so we can have quicker access across to the east side of town instead of going through the square, because that's usually what slows us down a bit. So I think that when that gate gets installed and we have quick access, I could see these times speed up. So we did have back in December, somebody asked if it was crime up. And what we had was a rash of burglaries. And in those rash of burglaries, we couldn't figure out what was going on. I think the average was 3 burglaries in December, what we were looking at the past years, and all of a sudden it was at 19. The Valley was at 28, and I think their average was about 12. So we really had a big increase in robberies. and car burglary. Sorry about that. And I kind of skipped ahead here a little bit, but in January of this year, an alert citizen in Windsor was awakened by some noise, and when he went out there, he saw that somebody was trying to break into his car. He immediately called dispatch, and dispatch sent out a deputy, which was able to stop the car because they got a description of that vehicle. Within that car were 4 suspects, and the car filled with property. Come to find out, it was all stolen property. Our property crimes unit came out, and they ended up doing a thorough investigation, found out that this was a ring of people that were coming to Sonoma County specifically to break into cars and steal property. And sometimes they would steal a car and fill that up with property and leave. So this ring was out of Fairfield, and they pretty much confessed to most of all the burglaries here in Sonoma and throughout the valley. Unfortunately, some of that property couldn't be returned to the owners because it was already sold for money. But that was a good investigation, showed that, the resources that we have here in Sonoma, that when we call our detectives, they can go out and provide this type of investigations. In 2017, we had bank robberies. I don't know if you remember that. We had 3 bank robberies. 2 were solved pretty quickly. The third one, because of our witnesses that saw this subject running through some, I think it was a knit cap and some clothing into a garbage can, and reported it immediately. Our CSI detectives were able to collect those items and get a DNA profile. And a couple months ago, that profile matched somebody that was in custody. So our detectives went out and investigated that, went out and talked to that person, got another DNA sample to confirm it was him, and an arrest was made. Right now, he's got charges pending in San Francisco, and once he clears those charges, he'll be brought to Sonoma County to answer for the robbery here. Also, in April of 2018, there was a sexual assault and kidnapping case. A victim who was in San Francisco called for a ride share after leaving a bar in San Francisco. She got into this car, and she was forcibly brought here to Sonoma, where she was victimized. Eventually, she was able to escape, and an employee from Safeway was able to help her out. Again, the community that we live in. This was a very extensive investigation. It took over 200 hours of the staff viewing videos from different areas, and about 20 search warrants were written. The detective that worked this case was able to find a suspect and a suspect description and a vehicle. This information was given to other law enforcement agencies. A Nevada police officer recognized the person and immediately notified us. We contacted that person, brought him in for an interview, and eventually an arrest was made. And the evidence that was found in his phone and other things led to another suspect, which we also made an arrest on that. And again, DNA was part of this investigation also. And of course, maybe a couple weeks ago, we had a vandalism case out here on Blue Wing. And again, a resident that heard a bunch of noises called into dispatch and immediately gave a description of the subjects and a vehicle. And with the help of the Sonoma County Sheriff's deputies and the Sonoma police officers that responded, we were able to stop the vehicle and pretty much identify that these were the suspects responsible for that vandalism, and they were arrested. 7 victims, and I believe 6 suspects were arrested. And then most recently, we've had 2 cases where threats were made at our schools. The first investigation, school staff were notified by a student that criminal threats were made. School staff and our SRO discovered that a student displayed an object resembling a holster and made threats to harm other students. The student was identified, questioned, and arrested. The second investigation was similar, where again, several students became aware that threats were made, and that the threats were going to be carried out on March 1st of 2019. Once this threat was being circulated through social media, the school staff and our SRO were able to identify who this person was, and an arrest was made. On both occasions, we concluded that the threats were not viable, but regardless, we took each of these serious, and we will provide the necessary patrol to keep our schools safe. Now, Sonoma County Unified School District Superintendent Socorro Shields and I prepared a letter to, and we circulated that to the parents and the staff. And I'll just read part of it, just so we can assure our community, our schools, that they're going to be safe. We're going to take whatever measures we can to keep them safe, to patrol those areas if we have to continuously. So this is just part of the letter. These types of incidents instills fear in students, staff, family members, and our community. Law enforcement take these matters seriously because even if the actual threat or subsequent act is not carried out, the mere threat has lasting effects due to prior incidents that have occurred throughout our country. We are grateful that once again people saw something and said something. So that's the bottom line, that we need to tell our kids that if you hear something, no matter how insignificant it is, just tell somebody and we'll look into it. We just want to keep everybody in Sonoma safe. Because, I mean, this is a good city with great people like we just saw, and we want to keep it that way. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
For us? No?
I have some questions. Can you just specifically talk about what the staffing is in the town of Sonoma at night? So our police station closes at 5, is that right?
That's correct. So we have a total of 10 deputies. So at any one time, we have 2 deputies on duty. So right now we have actually 3 deputies because we have a cover deputy that comes in at 1, and he'll stay till 11:30 or midnight. During that time, there will be a day shift that will go home at 5, and then the next day shift will go home at 7. By that time, we already have a graveyard guy coming in at 7. So when that last day shift goes home, there's a graveyard person that starts his shift. So there's 2 people.
So there are always 2 dedicated people in the town of Sonoma
Exactly.
working.
And of course, there's sometimes a sergeant, so that'll be 3. You know, because technically the sergeant can go out there and also handle calls for service.
And then can you just explain to us, what do they do at night?
At night, well, they patrol the city. They go out there, and depending on what is going on, we do have an unmarked detective car that they'll go out and cruise in that, and they'll walk, because I did it before, so we'll walk the bike paths. They'll go to the parks and walk those. It just depends on what we're seeing. If we're seeing vandalism, if we're seeing thefts, we'll kind of work towards stopping that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Harvey?
So with regard to county budget cuts, we have 2 officers here in the city. If there's due to retraction or a reduced number of officers that are found in the county, if there's a call that happens in the county, is there an increased likelihood that those officers will be pulled out of Sonoma? In what cases do those officers come out of our city to service calls in the county?
Yeah, so even with the budget cuts we're hearing, I do everything I can not to affect the baseline response, right? So I try to keep the minimum level so we have minimum staffing right on the streets, and so the same that you would have here, minimum of 2 deputies all day here, is the same that we would have out in the valley. So the budget cuts you're going to see is it affects like the support units. So this last time you saw, we lost the gang unit and we lost the community policing unit. You know, they reorganized the narcotics unit. They're all things that support patrol. Okay. So, you know, I couldn't foresee, I mean, I don't know, budgets do weird things, but I couldn't foresee them doing enough to our budget to where I would have to actually reduce the number of deputies on the street. Okay. So when we're balancing it out, it's all about public safety. That's our primary mission. So the last thing we want to do is affect that.
So it's more like specialty services that got cut rather than just frontline deputies.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
specialty things and then just trying to do more with less. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So I will tell you, we've gone over budget cuts and we have our plan, and none of it affects taking deputies off the streets or reallocating deputies elsewhere. It's all support stuff and administrative support and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. And then for either one of you can answer this, I'd like to hear a little bit more about bike path patrolling and how that process works, how often that happens, and then a little bit more about what we have in place in our schools. I think it's a really important piece. How often do police officers go out and talk to kids? How do we kind of make that connection?
So number one, the way bike path works is just depends on what's going on that night. Like this last 2 weeks when it's been raining, they're not going to be out there walking the path.
Yeah.
But normally, when they're cruising downtown and that they want to stop and just make a patrol during night to walk the bike path, they will. It just depends on what's going on in the crime level. So if we're seeing a lot of thefts, they're definitely going to be out there. During this, I think at the beginning of spring, we do have bikes, and we're working on getting a couple more bikes because the ones we have are pretty much getting run down, and they'll go out on bike patrol. In regards to the schools, I mean, since I became chief, that was my primary goal, to have the deputies go out to the schools and adopt the school. And like I said before, we have deputies that went out there and started reading to kids, and now they enjoy it. So I'll revisit that, and I think they're still doing it. I think they're still going out there. I didn't bring the exact stats, but I did run to see how many COP events, that's how they label it, a COP event and they've increased by about 90%. I mean, it's just gone up.
Great.
Because that was one of my directives, and it really came down from Captain Noggle. The way we're doing things is we're working with the public. We want to be one with the public. We want to help solve issues that they may have, and I think a lot of it says because has shown that people said something, people are doing something, people are calling us, and they're helping. I mean, this community says it all. People will want to help us, and we appreciate that.
Great. I just want to say I really appreciate the efforts of the police force for getting out there and doing the community outreach. It's such an important piece, and I appreciate that. And obviously, we want to keep our schools safe, and the fact that the kids spoke up, reached out, really shows that it's effective. And I just want to appreciate you for doing that.
Thank you very much, and we do have the coffee with the cop like earlier, so come and meet our deputies. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Agrimonti?
So, Chief, there are two officers. How many shifts are there during a 24-hour
There's
period?
2 day shifts, a cover shift, and 2 graveyards, but they're working 11.5-hour shifts to make it work. So where the Valley, they have 12 deputies, so they have 2 extra deputies. So they work a 4-10 schedule. So they're able to work a true day shift, a 2 swing shift, and a 2 graveyard. So we're trying to figure out a way to make it better for us because we do train quarterly. And that's when it's hard to send some of those deputies to training because if they're working a graveyard and their training day falls on a day that they just got from work and we can't have them work, so they have to lose one of their days off to go train. So we're trying we're going to see if we can look at a different schedule. So that'll make it easier for them to train.
And the SRO at the high school is Eric Smith still?
That's correct.
He's great. I mean, he works with the RISC program here. They're having another presentation soon. He really is a wonderful resource for them, so I appreciate that.
Yes, he is. And any time that they have a serious call for service at any school, he's going to be the one that's going to be responding. He does do a great job, and he does know his resources.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for coming. I think it makes public feel good when they can hear statistics and know what's happening. What is going on, or if you could explain the K-9 unit and how that is, how that works in Sonoma?
Well, the K-9 unit, he's part of a shift. So he works on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday on that side of the week because technically that's usually the busiest time when we have more people coming into town. So he is scheduled to work from 1 o'clock to midnight. So that's his shift. We can't adjust his shift any other way because he's part of that. So normally, like Mike Matelli, who's our motor officer, he's also part of a shift. So he's part of day shift. So I can't move him around to work. Hey, we're having more traffic issues on a Thursday night. Well, he's scheduled to work Sunday through Wednesday, and he's part of that shift. So we do have a motor guy. He is a full-time motor guy. He is our traffic investigator, but that's what his specialty is to be a traffic investigator. So if we do have a serious accident where there is serious injuries, we'll call him out to come and investigate, because he's gone to all the specialty schools to basically investigate that accident and find what the cause was.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I have a last question. And I thank you very much for coming today. It's very helpful. With regard to the staff here, how often are they rotated through, and do we have a core of the 10 people, of the 10 positions? How many people fill those positions?
So out of 10, we have all 10 deputies. So they usually rotate if they get selected to detectives. So they usually spend about 3 to 5 years is the average. So they come out here, they do a good job, they do their own investigations, they write search warrants, and the investigations, they notice that, hey, these deputies are out here working, they're going above and beyond of what they're supposed to do. And that's one of the luxuries of working at Sonoma, because you do have that time to do that case and do it very well. And they get selected. Hey, are you interested in coming into property crimes or domestic violence, sexual assault unit, or the violent crimes investigation unit? Put in for it. And they go through an interview process, and then if they get selected, they get picked out of here. At that point, like Captain Noggle said, we have a whole agency of deputies to select from. So we'll put out an email saying who's interested in coming to Sonoma. Come and work overtime one day. Come and check out the city. And the ones that are interested, they'll put in, and we'll select somebody. And then once they start working here, they realize what a great place it is to work here.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Mary, can I just make it just a few other small things? There are a couple other advantages of the contract. One is, this is hard work where a deputy can get hurt, right? You can tear a shoulder, or you can sprain an ankle or something, and then be out while you're recuperating. The way the contract works is that person is out for the 30 days, but then the county has to backfill that individual, and we're not charged. So in a typical city, that person might be out for 4 months or 6 months, and you're having to backfill with overtime. And in a small agency, it's tough because you don't have that many people. So that's kind of a nice piece of the contract, both financially and in terms of maintaining your service levels. The other piece I just want to mention, the school resource officer really is a partnership, and it's a great partnership between the city, the sheriff, and the school district. And I know the county and the sheriff's police department recently also did some active shooter training at this high school. That was some point within the last year, 18 months. So again, there are these kind of resources and expertise being brought into our community. And just want to reiterate, I do think if you see something, say something, and we're safe because people care about this town or are involved. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted 1 second just to kind of address your staffing too. And one of the benefits is these contracts are a priority for us, right, when it comes to staffing. So if Chief Rodriguez has guys that he wants to rotate out or whatever, he gets to do that. He contacts me, and then, so on the selection, yeah, you're getting deputies out here, most of them with good experience already and good training, and sergeants especially. So when he's talking about the ones that leave to go to detectives, well, they go to detectives, then they promote, then they supervise, and then they come back. And so, it's a really stable program for you guys, because you're getting deputies pre-trained and everything. So, and like I said, with him, if he's not happy with an employee, he calls me. I've got lots of homes to put him over there, and then he gets to pick what he wants. So just to clarify.
Thank you. Very informative. Anyone else? No. We really appreciate hearing from you both. This is a helpful item.
Thank you for having us.
Good night. Next is the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. I will open it up for public comment. If you have a comment on the items on the consent calendar only.
Oh, wait, no, sorry.
That's okay.
Hello, Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Lynn Marie DeVinson. I live at 65 Guadalajara. As you know, I've been doing community outreach for the Sonoma and actually also in Napa neighborhood associations. And we are sorry, I just ran on the door, community alliances to educate the public on the hazards of electromagnetic frequencies called EMFs. And in particular, I'm sorry, the consent
That's okay.
calendar.
Did you want to pull item 4.2?
No.
Oh,
Am I still allowed to comment?
You can only comment on the items on the consent calendar. That's what I'm saying. But if you want to pull item 4.2, then we can have it read.
Or she can just make her public,
okay.
she can make her comments on a public comment if she just wants to provide some information and doesn't necessarily have to be pulled unless there's a broader conversation, so.
Go ahead.
So
You can go ahead.
I can't? Okay.
Yeah.
It's brief. I just basically I wanted to thank the city and the council for bringing in this item because we need all the protection we can get from the FCC unreasonable regulations. And I wanted to mention that someone recently told me about these public websites where you can find the location of cell towers and antennas. And within 4 miles of my home at 5th West and MacArthur, there are already 20 towers in place and 219 antennas. And on the hotspot map, I couldn't even get a count because it's blanketed with the little blue circles. So each one is a hotspot. And so this helped me to understand why the telecom industry feels like they can do whatever they want, because they've been doing whatever they want with our public rights of ways for a long time. And so this is our communities pushing back this HR 530 that you're addressing on the consent calendar. And this was mentioned in the San Jose Patch of January of this year. Quote, 100 cities sue the FCC over broadband power grab. The legal challenge is now in the U.S. Court of Appeals, supported by Representative Eshu's bill, HR, it says 350, I thought it was 530. Anyway, thank you, and we really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Roll call?
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley,
Yes.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
And before we start the next item, I'd like to just take a 3-minute break. Thanks. Reconvene here. If we're ready, we can move on to item 6.1, which is a cannabis study session to review, discuss, and provide direction on local regulation of commercial cannabis activities. And I will turn it over to the city manager.
Great, thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council. So the purpose of tonight's study session is to basically have a more focused conversation on the basically business points or policy points that the council wants to have in a regulatory ordinance for commercial cannabis. So
I'm
our
sorry,
last,
Madam Mayor, could I ask for, before you start, if this could, could be corrected, because the vote said 3-2, it wasn't, it was 4-1.
I was just
And
going
I
to
talked to you
Yeah.
about that today.
just going to mention, so at our last meeting, the direction was three, the majority, 3 council members and 2 in terms of moving forward with commercial cannabis. In terms of the hiring of HDL to assist us with this effort, that was a 4-1 vote. So sorry for that. So again, what we have with us tonight, Dave McPherson, who is the Cannabis Compliance Director with HDL Companies. You saw, this is the same PowerPoint that was in your packet. He's going to walk through it with you. We'll take questions, we'll go to the public, and then we'll come back to kind of the key decision points that we're looking for you. And then let me just double check with Mr. Storr, our planning director. Was there a map, the additional map we handed out? They're out, okay. Does council have? We can come back. We'll go ahead and, I'm going to have Mr. McPherson, but we do have kind of what I'm going to call a baseline map for you. You had some sample maps that were to show some different options, but we also just have a baseline map, hard copy as well. And we'll walk through that. I'll have Mr. Storr walk through that with you at the end of Mr. McPherson's presentation. Okay, so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave McPherson with HDL.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity of being with you today, Mayor and members of the City Council. We've outlined the agenda of just kind of a high profile of some of the different parts of best practices of developing an ordinance and some of the issues and questions that come up a lot when we try to go through this process to kind of share with you, and so we can get some clarification and some direction at the same time, make sure that there's clear understanding of some of the topics that we are going to address. Did I just kill it? Push the right. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the first thing that's important, I think, on any ordinance that is adopted for regulatory purposes for this industry is it really focuses on the local control component of it. You know, public safety land use is very critical for a local agency to have control over, because whatever the state has doesn't necessarily always going to make that clear for you or give you some kind of control or authority there for that. So as one of the things we always try to remind the various agencies is that as they move forward, there's options for you to what you can and cannot include. You can prohibit any type of activity, except for right now there's that gray area about how we're going to go move forward deliveries. The state regulations changed to try to find that it could be permissible. However, that's still not clear on there. The League of Cities actually just came out recently indicating that they may take action at the state on that, and a few other cities have actually taken a position regarding that. So there's the little legal review that needs to be evaluated and kind of see where that smooths out as we move forward and get direction. And then again, there's activities that you can permit. You can permit all of them, or you can regulate them, or you can eliminate some of them or not have some of them. Some of those that we've indicated on here are larger cultivation permits, are micro businesses, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about what a micro business is so you're clear on what that is. And then the most important thing I think that we'll have in our discussion tonight is really the sensitive buffers and what types those are, and really the distances, and clarify some examples of some scenarios that may occur with that. As I mentioned to you, the 3 key elements to you is time, place, and manner. Our staff has fortunately have been able to regulate in Nevada, Colorado, and California over 16,000 businesses of cannabis businesses. And with that, it always comes down to these three issues: time, place, and manner at the local issue. What time someone can do something or have a type of activity, the place in which is going to be, which will be the breadth of the conversation as we talk about the land use, and the manner in which how it can be done and how you want it to be done for both best practices and local control. So we've kind of outlined just kind of what a typical ordinance will look like. I just grabbed, put chapter 5 in here because typically that's the business and regulation section. So, and working with the city attorney, we'll consider out where it may drop into, but typically the best recommendation is to put it in the regulations for business licenses and regulations in chapter 5. But with that said, clearly defining the authority and the purpose and the intent of why you're having it there, what laws are going to be that both at the state and local level of what you want to have there. We find that having definitions that are appropriate for the ordinance that you have in there when you define something is clearly defined, so there's no issues regarding as you move forward and people are trying to challenge of what's permitted and not permitted and consistency of what those definitions are. And then the cannabis permit required. Making it that if someone wants to do a certain activity, you clearly define what the permit is required and what activities will be allowed in there. And because you're probably looking at limited numbers on what will be allowed in the city when you make that decision, you're probably going to want to have some kind of application process that's clearly defined. Our experience has been that agencies that didn't have a clear defined process ends up having a lot of appeals, makes it unclear for the applicant of what they should be putting in or providing to the city. And so that when we design that out and outline that for you and provide some direction from that, it'll be important that you have that, but also that you have it specified on how that will be done in the ordinance. The maximum number of permits and the type will be important, so it's clear of what you're going to allow and the numbers that you're going to allow, or if you're going to actually designate a specific amount to that. And then we have experienced that one of the biggest issues or concerns for public safety, it's not necessarily what's going to happen regarding with the business on the outside. Our experience has been that 80% of the problems happens internally inside those businesses, and therefore requiring backgrounds, which is state required for the operators of the business, but also for the employees. So you know that if there's any concerns of the type of people that are employed in them aren't causing problems for the operator or down the road for the city as the business gets up and running. And then the question always comes up, well, how do we make sure that we collect all the fees and charges associated with this? So we outline in there. And the last section in here is about the sensitive buffers. We'll go into a lot more detail on that as we go through the presentation. So the highlights, real quick, is like who's going to administer this. Obviously, it's going to be done by the city manager designee, trying to identify where the appropriate person and who would play the roles in there, or many roles in there through the different departments. And then issuing, as I mentioned, the permit itself and the background checks that will be done in there, and what that process looks like, both at the state requirements, and also there's a specific process that if you want it to be done both by the DOJ and the FBI, which we'll come back with a resolution getting authorization to move that up in order to get access to the information, because it's still confidential, and typically a live scan is only for employment or a criminal investigation, and this is neither one of those, so you have to actually have special permission from the two agencies in order to do that. And then implementing that as far as direction to do that. And then it goes without saying they're going to have to comply with the state regulations and the local regulations as well. But as again, in the ordinance, it's important to have those local regulations, because even if there's a state regulation to certain things that you want to have control in, Finding that there's a problem and notifying the state doesn't give you the same authority to take action on them. So those things that are important to you to take action on at the local level in immediate action and not it being stretched out through an appeals process at the state level, it would be important that those are incorporated in the ordinance. These are the three mandatory types of things that are required at the state level: a valid local license, a state license, and then everyone has to have a seller's permit. So those are just the high level requirements. We're not going to go into a lot of details, but when we're provided direction from you, what we'd like to do is come back and talk about all the different subcategories in a license that are important to you, and dealing and working with over 125 agencies and the same questions that you probably had at your outreach discussions, where the community has addressed concerns with that. As you read about cannabis businesses in general, of what have caused problems and issues and concern, the goal would be to create a best practice that would address most of these types of regulatory components in here, including the activities on this page as well. So what would be the procedures? As we mentioned earlier, that you're going to want to have an application process, but once you get in there, you're going to have the nuances of the protocols, just like you would do for a land use permit, is that, you know, if you deny something or if you suspend a license or a business, what are the actions taken on it? If you want to have a revocation of the permit, all that has to be clearly defined of how you go through that process, so somebody knows it's very transparent and it's clear of when you take action on a business, that then you know they know exactly what you are action you are taking on them. So having that in there. And then we've already talked about it, the why concerns regarding the background and some of the concerns that we have there. Another thing that has changed from the old transitional businesses when they were co-ops and collectives, for the most part, they were allowed to have volunteers because co-ops and collectives were typically volunteers. Now that you're in a regular business environment in which there are state regulations that come on, there cannot be no longer volunteers in these businesses. Part of it has to do with labor law too, because if they work or in them for a specific amount of hours, they would violate labor law. And then one of the things that the state requires, but also I think some important that when the state requires a badge requirement, is that you have uniformity in that. So at the local level, you can have it where it has the city logo on it. You have certain information on there that's more specific. So if there's a turnover of employees, you have some kind of internal controls associated with the concerns or issues that why employees may be leaving or dismissed. So if you see a problem, you can have some records of that. And when there's inspections done, you have clear identification related to the individual. And then, of course, attorneys always love to have this, is to make sure you cover the liability component of there. Having indemnifications in the ordinance or in the application process makes it very clear that some of the requirements, for example, if at the federal level all of a sudden the feds would come out and say that there are certain things that are not lawful and you decide to stop in the process as a result of that, you would have language in there saying that part of the reason why is an indemnification is if we had any issues regarding at the state or at the federal level, then you can stop it or revoke a permit or not renew one as a result of that. SB 94 came out as a result of some CEQA challenges. And what that did was, prior to 2016, where cities were still in that gray area moving forward or not doing it, and there was concerns from communities that there wasn't a CEQA process being done in this process. This put in there where if you did it before July 1st of 2019, then it did not have to go forward to the CEQA component for the purpose of the regulatory. But when it has land use issues, there's different sections of codes which we cited in here that there's criteria that would be that will meet that requirement. If we're directed to move forward on this, there's a good possibility we may have this done by July 1st, but there's always snags that come in there that may get us behind that date, in which case just wanted to make you aware of this section. As we go through this process with the applications or even in the annual regulatory component of this, or determining any costs or time associated with staff, the goal would be to make sure that you're 100% cost recovery. So regardless what process ends up going, it gets determined. This process will do a fiscal analysis to identify the total cost of burden costs and make sure that the city is made whole on the application process and all the fees associated with it. So here's the area that we think is going to cause some of the big concerns that we have, and that really is the buffer zones and what locals can and cannot do. And there's been some moving targets regarding definitions associated with this, but the state requirement under the Business Profession Codes 26054 says that the buffer that's set, cities can designate a buffer greater than this, but the set standard buffer that's the default is 600 feet from K through 12 schools, daycare, and youth centers. The challenge that we have is what defines a youth center. So determining on, as we have the more detailed conversation about this, is the definition has been changed and gotten issues or examples of things that we've had. For example, we've had a museum that was designed for did after school youth programs where they brought kids in and did special activities for them, but that was not defined as a youth center, and so we went through the process. There were some appeals associated with that, so clearly defined that where its primary use is associated, it becomes very critical. If you're going to use a park, but you're really questioning was the reason why you have the park is because there's ball fields on there or soccer fields or activities where there's a lot of kids. The focus on what your concern would be, not a park that could be used primary, that's used for everyone if you're focusing on the youth component of this. We've had a scenario where actually by definition, a Chuck E. Cheese can be a youth center. So saying that yoga, pizza parlors, places that have less than so many vending machines, things of that, as you start exploring this in some of the areas where you can see where there's a lot of activities, and you clearly do not want that be defined as one of the youth center or youth facilities, that it needs to be clearly defined in there. So down the road, when a business tries to get a piece of property or a place to apply for, that there's no questions or concerns down the road after they've invested time into that. And also the definition of the distance buffers. Even though the state says that you have to have a buffer, and you can go less than that buffer, you do need to have that buffer designed, you can't modify the buffer of what the definition, and that is parcel to parcel. You can't go door to door, you can't go door to the parcel line, you can't get creative how you get to that distance. Now, if you reduce that distance, you can do that. For example, we've had a client that decided to say daycare, even though the state buffer is 600 feet there, they reduced it to 200 feet, and in some cases 50 feet. And their logic was that they wanted to reduce that because it was less of a concern to them, because you have kids that are basically supervised 24/7. They're not there. They don't understand what's in front of them, although they were concerned about K through 12 schools, so they did not modify the restrictions on there. We've seen it where the definitions, because of the design of the community, would very limit what might be permitted. So because it may be a non-conforming types of locations, the way a city was laid out, or just structurally in their general plan, where they reduce numbers up and down based on some of those flexibilities in there, which you have the ability to do. However, keep in mind, though, is that if you reduce the number down, you need to define what that distance will be. And if you get too far down, you have to have some minimum distance that would be in there. Another example that we've had is where they wanted to remove something or remove a category, is that if you have something, for example, like a smoking ordinance where there's a limited distances from a building, and typically it's around 25 feet to 30 feet. So if you have something consistent with what to reduce it, you can define it from a certain restriction on there, and as long as the state does not balk at that based on the saturation of the area, then you can do that. So in the presentations, we provided you the buffer maps that were provided in the presentation and the report from the initiative. And so this shows and reflects the initiative, that the initial interpretation of the buffer zones defined by the initiative and what were listed on there. And we'll circle back to these, but I just want to let you know that we're on there. And part of it is that you still have an initiative that potentially could be there in 2020. And so knowing what those include and don't include will be part of a conversation you may want to have. The second map here shows the initiative along with the state-defined buffers for use-serving facilities. So you can see where they are on the maps as well. And of course, there's some additional maps that were provided to you as well. The third map is just the state and the state buffer zones as they are defined without the initiative zones in there. So you can see what the minimum would be there if you didn't reduce, if you just stayed status quo with the 600-foot.
Could we just clarify this map actually doesn't show that?
Oh, am I on the wrong one? State buffer areas.
It has both all parks and.
Oh, and it has the parks on. Am I on the right one?
And it's including things that are not.
This map shows the state-defined buffer zones around all sensitive uses without those on there. And we do have the parks on here, but I don't think the park is circled on here. And maybe David, am I clear on that, or clarification on that?
This map's not circling parks, but it looks like it's circling schools that are not Sonoma Valley Unified School District schools.
So
and it's also circling other uses.
Yeah, so this map we have staffed, these maps were done in August of last year. So we did not go back and update them. So there on this map initially was the school buffer zones for K-12, public and private. It also included some daycares. And then it also included some youth serving facilities. So like the library, the teen center at Maxwell. So again, this was illustrated to say, if you took the state and then you also put on kind of a wide net on what could be youth serving, here's the amount of space you would have left. So again, part of this, and we'll talk about it when we get into the maps, part of the question for council is, the buffers show where these are different kind of lenses of where things can't be, depending if you put a buffer in. Part of the question for council is really, where are you comfortable having them? And then you can kind of look at some of those buffers to determine, where you want to go. So, and we do have one other map that we'll hand out to you that really is just the K-12, kind of what we would call kind of the baseline, K-12 public and private. Yes.
That's the one we already have.
Yes, so that's when we hand it out to you. It's not in the packet, but we wanted to kind of, because this starts to kind of layer and layer and layer, and there's less and less options. We wanted to kind of go back and give you probably kind of the highest level of a buffer, which would be K-12 public and private schools only as a starting place. And then if you want to layer other things on top of it, you could.
Thank you.
Okay. So this next slide, kind of what the goal I was trying to show you here is that oftentimes there are different processes that you can go to. There are some agencies that will only do a regulatory process because they do not want to tie it to a land, like a conditional use permit. And then we have those that go strictly through a conditional use process only. But what we typically see is that you go through the regulatory process to kind of vet through a regulatory function for cannabis businesses specifically. And you say, that's great. Now let's make sure you're complying with typical CUP processes for the building and the facility where you're at, and making sure you're meeting all the requirements that are for the property. And that way, if a business that you're awarding a permit to sells the business, or there's problems with that, and you revoke the permit or remove that person, but you still want that business to be in that facility, just not that operator, then it still follows the conditional use permit component there. And so our experience has been it's the blend of both, so that planners focus on the planning side, the regulatory process clearly defines the business operator, and the other side has to do with the location and what terms and conditions that may be put upon them for that facility. So I wanted to put this slide on here because a lot of times I think there's the obvious, and you're very well educated and going through and understanding the businesses here, but we get some confusion regarding some of the process, especially with a distributor or how distributors work, and we're starting a lot of blends on this. So I wanted to just kind of step through this a little bit. So clearly a cultivator or someone is going to be cultivating the product and is going to move the product to market. They can either move it straight to a distributor or they can move it to a manufacturer if it's an oil. If they move it to a manufacturer to create an oil. The testing is done either one of those steps, but what we commonly find, and we're experiencing more somewhere through this whole chain of custody, is that every touching point of the businesses are now wanting to have a business permit and also a distribution license. And the logic behind that is if I'm a cultivator and I got to pay a markup to move a product when I can't move it by myself anymore, the regulations changed to allow them to also have a distribution license. So I can take that product myself, move it all the way through what I need to do, all the way to a retailer. Same with the manufacturing. I can move it through as long as I have a distribution license. I can have it tested, meet the requirements. There is that separation of duty, but I still can have that permit. And a distribution license could be done of two ways as you think about this. If you want to even allow them to have a distribution, I can have a distribution license for transport only, which means that I can only move my own product. I can't move everyone else's in the neighborhood or throughout the community or other licensees. Or I can have a distribution license where I can move my product, but I can also move multiple businesses as well through that process. So the key to the distributor, though, is why there's that separation, but sometimes it's confusing that people think a distributor, when we have that discussion, a distributor is a retailer because they think they're distributing a product to an individual or the end consumer, and that is not the case. And so I want to make sure there's that clear distinction of a distributor versus a dispensary or a retailer, that they are not one and the same, and it's not also, a delivery service as well, distributing it out in the community. So I would say about 40% of the businesses that we've experienced with are getting a distribution license along with a different license. It doesn't matter if it's a cultivation, if it's a manufacturing, or a dispensary. They want to have that control of being able to have efficiencies and reduce their margins or improve their margins by having their own distribution license or one form or another. So be important to be aware of that as we move through this. However, there are a lot of distributors that will just be a distributor and not have any other component of a business as well. Like I mentioned, there's about 40% of them that will double up on that. So we listed some of the questions that I think we're going to circle back after I think there's public discussion or comments made. But after we do that, we'd like to come back and get some clarifications on some of these different areas. But I did want to touch on a couple of these as we go through them just for clarification of understanding. So in this case, a storefront is clearly a retailer that's walk-in traffic. But a non-storefront sometimes is, as people don't understand, is the non-storefront means is that, again, there is no walk-in traffic. We see businesses that are operating in commercial buildings where they're on a third story, where there's professionals, doctors, attorneys, engineers, and people are just calling in orders or downloading on the internet, and they just got drivers outside that are upstairs and they're packaging it together, giving it to drivers, and they're out on the street, and there's no walk-in traffic at all. There's right now. In the county itself, there's probably about a half a dozen deliveries that are actually permitted. And so this is a popular model as well as having a non-storefront. And in a storefront business, if you allow to do deliveries, then they don't have to have a separate permit. It's one and the same in the storefront. That just gives them the permission to do both of those, or you can have two different types of activities. So cultivation, the only thing I wanted to state on this as we go back and we circle back on this is that based on the type of the makeup of the city is that there's outdoor, indoor, and cultivation and green light. What we've tried to point out to here is that if you were going to permit this, is that the 1A, 2A, 3 permits are indoor only. So you'd have to, if you wanted to be more specific to be indoor, you would identify it. The 1, 2, 3s are different sizes. A 1 is 5,000 square feet. A 2 is 10,000 square feet. A 3 is 22,000 square feet, and that's the canopy space of the cultivations facility. It can be bigger, but they can't have more than that. And a 4 is a nursery. So as we circle back in that discussion, making that clear for you. The manufacturing has changed some of the options for you, where it used to be volatile and non-volatile, which we have here. There are also now just processing types or permits that are just, if they're just processing, in other words, they don't make and extract any oils, they're just making productions of that, or doing pre-rolls for flour, or packaging or labeling of things. That's how the N's and the P's are. An S permit is where they're actually sharing a facility, where one business may own it and allow people come in on specific days or hours to actually run an operation where they can't afford to be in business themselves. So they're actually renting space for a period of time in a distinct area within a big operation, and that's what a Type S permit has. Testing labs is like a blood lab. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space. It's not a concern regarding public safety as far as the product itself. These are in high demand. There's only 41 testing labs throughout the state as of now. And some of those are businesses that own multiple operations up and down the state. So this is a high demand concern. We have found that more and more cities are not putting limitations on the number of this because they can't even get one into town, let alone trying to get more. So if there's these types of businesses are willing to come, they are higher level jobs, a little more higher skill, and there's the lowest level of concern regarding public safety or land use for their usage. So the micro business is the one that I wanted to depending on the other categories that you choose to allow or permit. A micro business can be a consolidation of those as long as there's 3 of the 4 types of activities. So, for example, if you chose to not allow cultivation in town, but you were going to allow the other 3, as long as they have those 3 of the 4, they can still be defined as a micro business. If you go to only allow 2 of the types of activities, then they can't be a micro business because that's the threshold that they have to have 3 of the 4. The other key things on a micro business, so if you wanted to control things but allow a little of everything, a cultivation facility in a micro business cannot take more than 10,000 square feet. And for the manufacturing side of it, they can only do non-volatile extractions from that type of facility. But it would allow them to consolidate all 4 functions or 3 of the 4 of those into one facility. Some of the advantages of that is it doesn't take as many businesses in town because it can consolidate a function and do well like a micro business brewery does. So this is kind of a tentative timeline, just kind of show you visual as we've gone through. We mentioned to you that we are in that bubble spot regarding moving forward on the regulatory ordinance of land use by the time before that CCOR, the July 1st, depending on the direction provided to you. And then this is kind of just an estimated of how we can move through it depending on how we go through this without any hiccups and anticipated addressing the different areas. So with this time, I'd be more happy to take any questions from you.
Great.
Do you have any?
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Councilmember Hundley?
Question about what you were saying about the background checks. So is it the city then that manages the background checks for every employee that ever works at one of these businesses, or is it the business itself has to like provide a certification to the city for employees?
So there's various ways that it can be done. You can have it done at from the city side, and there's multiple ways of doing it, either through the sheriff's or a third party. Or you could have it done where, depending if you don't want to have that much control over it, where you can put in the ordinance that you require that the business do the life scans or backgrounds, and that they're subject to verification upon an inspection or a compliance review. So we've done it that way too. We as HDR, we've actually done over 1,200 background checks for our clients, both for the operators and for the businesses as well. And so there's different ways of doing that. Again, you could have it done through the sheriff if that's desire of doing it that. You can have it done through a third party, or you can have it done at the example I gave you through the business of conducting those.
And my next question, for manufacturing, which kind of permit would be if, say, it was going to be someone that did not necessarily extract the materials, but say prepared a food item?
So that would probably be an N permit, where they're taking the product, or it could actually be a type 6 too, because you can actually do processing. You can make cookies, you can make chocolates. You just don't actually physically extract the oil yourself. You purchase the oil and then you put it in the product. So type 6.
Councilmember Harvey?
So with regard to cultivation, in order to allow a dispensary to sell things like clones or seeds, would they have to have a nursery permit, or would that be allowed just as a dispensary?
Yeah, a retailer could sell clones or seeds as part of a retail component of it, as long as it's not a flowering plant.
Okay. And then I have a few questions on what types of things we can require of a business coming in. Are we allowed to require prevailing wage or certain salary requirements for workers in that business, or is that not something we can regulate? Do I have a list of things that I want to know?
So typically, and this is part of the ordinances, there's a section where we talked about the permits, fees, and their policies and procedures. Is an ordinance that we would bring back for you of consideration is that the council will adopt all policies, procedures, and guidelines. The guideline that we put to do is an application guideline as far as how that criteria is set. We have identified as all the areas that are concerns are key to you. Proposed location, qualifications, local enterprise, community benefit, neighborhood compatibility, employment and benefits of employees. And you can actually put in a merit-based process and put a scale of weight of the value you want in those.
And there isn't like a limit in terms of what we could do with that? Or are there pieces that we can't get involved in? Can we determine what sort of names? Can we say we don't want Canna anything in the name, or can we do things like that?
Specifically a name that might be a name brand or something like that nature. There are regulations that limit what you can actually signage. So you already have signage probably in your zoning code ordinances, but you can also have specific signage or limitations of what you can do from the outside. If you're talking about certain packages or something, that may be a different issue, because I don't know if you can limit that from their rights to do that. Now you could limit, like for example, gummy bears are not allowed in California, but
Sure.
that in the old days when people were saying we don't want to see that sold in the facilities.
Yeah, I'm asking specifically about the name of the business. So if we can create, require that it not be something that's obviously marijuana related or something like that, would be something, just wondering about that. And then I have questions also if there's requirements that we can do as far as how the sale process works. Just to be prepared for this, I went to a couple dispensaries in Santa Rosa and things like that, and I noticed that a lot of them have an at-door ID before you see any product, then a secondary ID station inside. Is that California state law, or is that something that we can regulate? And then secondarily, I have concerns about enforcement as far as we have a lot of tourists in this community, and so when people come in, they don't know the California state laws. You're allowed to drink wine on the plaza. They may assume that you're allowed to do other things on the plaza as well. Can we require that they reiterate what those laws are and explain that to people as they're coming to visit? Is that a requirement we can put in?
So the first example of the security of going into, you have to check ID going into a facility. It's usually good practice that it's a two-step approach where they check at the door because it's a low end. They got pretty good high technology identification machines that do that, and then it's usually checked again before they go into the facility or actually purchasing that.
Mm-hmm.
So those are good practices, but a lot of times we'll look at the security plan and their SOP plans to identify those things and make sure that they meet state regulations, but also what you have at the local level. Regarding educating people that are coming in when you're concerned about the plaza, you can require that or make it part of their education process as an exit package that they provide them, saying here is the city of Sonoma's ordinance regarding public consumption or where you can't do certain things, and provide that you can mandate it as part of the requirement for them on the exit package.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I just have a few. I wanted to dovetail on what Councilmember Hundley said about background checks. Who incurs that cost to do the background checks? Is it the business or the city?
As I mentioned to you, everything that would be a touching point of a cost could be a cost recovery to the business.
Oh, okay. The other overriding issue, of course, the big umbrella, and I don't know where the legislature is or the federal government with respect to cash. So I don't know what the status of that is.
Sure.
I mean, I know there's techniques to launder the cash, innocent, as it seems innocent. But, so what's the status of cash?
Well, there's a misnomer that the banks can't take cannabis money, and they're required to follow BSA requirements. They're very stringent, so they get gun shy of jumping into this because it's not all of them want to do that. There's about 350 business or financial institutions that are doing that. You actually have a credit union right here in the county that is actually very active, engaging or working with the community. And obviously they've been overwhelmed, so they've kind of pulled back a little. So there is an opportunity for them to do that. We are finding, where more and more businesses are getting access to bank accounts, probably 70% of them have access to some kind of banking funding from a variety of ways that they creatively do it, strategically do it, but they can. Mm-hmm. And those that can't, and even if they're done in higher volumes, it's not as critical of an issue. It's more about how the oversight and protocols are in place. The beauty is that we're going to be going into a metric system that you can track it from there in their POS systems. We currently regulate almost 800 businesses and oversee about $25 million throughout the state in our enforcement efforts and moving this in and out for our city and county clients. And so there isn't as much a concern as we had in probably 2 or 3 years ago. I know when I was with the city of Oakland, I had my first permittee that came in brought $1 million in a backpack to me, and so we had to look at protocols to address that, and they are addressed.
Well, I wish that would go away, the regulations, so actually businesses could actually bank the way that they should, especially if a municipality approves it. I don't understand that. So I wanted to ask, youth per business, I guess, is it almost discretion or an interpretation? I mean, I thought the operative word would be youth. Wherever, whether it's a library, a park, with respect. So I guess that's what my question.
So the difficulty is the definition of youth is very vague in state law. It refers back to the Business Professions Code that has certain criteria in there, but those criterias are not as defined. And so when someone applies for one and all of a sudden they get challenged from it, and again, I use examples, and more of them like a yoga for kids, or a dentist office that only works with kids, right? I mean, you can get variations in there from community to community of what that is. And so whatever you would like it to be above what the vagueness is, or you want clarity what it does not include, it's good practice to define that definition up front. As your city attorney will will be able to tell you about on another client that he's working with, that this came up because it wasn't clear when it actually went into that process.
The other question, the city of Sonoma has probably one of the most strongest smoking ordinances. So have you reviewed that in connection with cannabis?
Yes, so we've worked with clients on public consumption ordinances, and it's not just the consumption from the flower, it's also, using edibles or other products that are not, defining that public consumption. Ordinance may need to be updated to include where there's edibles and other activities that are not smoking or tobacco related as well. So it depends on how you bring the industry in your community, how you want to maybe reevaluate that if there's concerns regarding that being consumed in public.
And I wanted to ask possibly city manager or you, sir, I think we saw a page here, regulatory versus conditional use process. Is that something similar to the wine tasting rooms? So, what's happened to us.
Yes, so it's going to be similar. So we're looking at a regulatory ordinance is kind of staff's recommendation. So you will define what you want, where you're going to allow it, and kind of the operating parameters with it. Then that gets approved and set. You're going to go run your merit-based selection process, and let's just say you're going to allow one dispensary in town. And you're going to have 10 applicants come and apply, and we're going to run them through a merit-based process, and we'll talk at a future meeting what that looks like, and you'll give your input and direction on that, and you're going to choose one. Now that one business has got to go find where they're going to locate, and depending on what the business is, they're going to have to go through our typical planning process and get a use permit and review, any CEQA pieces, et cetera, and they're going to run through our planning director shop. So it's going to be very similar to kind of any future wine tasting ordinance, when you would allow something in the future.
Well, except that we can't do the licensing with tasting rooms because of
Correct.
state law.
Correct. So here you are able to do, it's going to be similar in the back end, but here, you do have an ability to license because it's not alcohol. Thank you. That's actually a very important point. So, but yeah, it's both pieces.
So I have one last question. I saw the chart. These were great. I mean, I love pictures, so I don't have to read so much. Thank you so much. But the test, you showed manufacturing testing, and I think I didn't tour a manufacturing business. I did I looked at testing, and they basically said you can't, the cultivator doesn't want to let go of a lot of their product. They're only going to give you a certain amount to test. So how is that going to work now if at the testing or the manufacturer's end that they may want to dispense? Did you say, or distribute?
Yeah, so really what it is, it's called the cultivator. So a cultivator, instead of someone else coming and picking up their product, and then the distributors, the responsibility of a distributor is three things. Test the product to make sure it meets quality control requirements of state law. Collect the excise tax and move the product from one licensee to another licensee. So if I can be a distributor too, and think about it, a UPS versus someone that has their personal truck driver, right, a business. So it costs me too much if I use one, and so I want to have full control over that. And I may be a business that's vertically integrated. I may have a cultivation facility 50 miles away, and I want to move that product to my own dispensary or to my manufacturing. I don't want to be paying a distributor to have to do those functions for me. So they want to have that control and keep their costs down for them. That's why some will do that.
Okay, so I guess that's where I got a little confused, because they're not cutting out the dispensary, are they? They're just distributing product.
They're just to a licensee, right.
And sometimes they are the dispensary.
They could be the dispensary in that scenario.
So who could the other licensee be then?
So again, a cultivator can be a cultivator and a distributor. A manufacturer can be a manufacturer and a distributor. A retailer could be a retailer and a distributor. The only thing they can't connect in there is a testing lab. They have their separation of duties on that.
So they are cutting out a dispensary or no? by doing that? I guess I'm
No, they're
confused. I'm
cutting
sorry.
out the distributor on its own. So if I was a distributor on my own, and think of UPS, right? I can move things around, but I can do it myself. I don't need UPS to move my product
So
for
there's
me.
no middleman.
There's no
It's-
middleman,
okay.
exactly.
I misunderstood that. Thank you, that's it.
Okay.
Councilmember Harvey?
Oh, no, okay.
Oh, okay. Any other questions?
I have a quick comment. This may have been made clear already. I'm not clear whether it was. Distribution and delivery are two different animals under the cannabis laws. They don't mean the same thing. Distribution is transportation of cannabis product between licensees. Delivery is the transportation of cannabis product from a licensee to an ultimate consumer.
Oh,
So a manufacturer, for example, can distribute the manufactured product to a dispensary. That's called distribution. And the dispensary then can transport the product to a consumer. And that's called delivery.
so I think that's what my confusion was. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Councilmember Hundley?
So going back to buffers, which I know we're going to talk about. So were you saying that labs are so rare now that cities just don't have, they just have very low barriers? Like, are there cities that don't put buffers on a lab?
Well, you still have the buffers, the state law buffers. You can reduce that number because if you're not concerned of them being, 25 feet from something because it's just not the concern of odor, security, traffic flow, walk-in traffic, all the things that you're concerned about, the other types of activities, a testing lab, and again, it's like picture going and getting a blood test. You go into a lab that could be in a commercial building with doctors, professionals, lawyers, whatever. You get your blood test and you go home. No one even knows, there's not an impact to the other businesses around them or the flow of traffic or safety issue or concern. That's what I was referring to on that aspect of it.
Okay. Councilmember Harvey?
And so your answer to Councilmember Hundley probably answered this question for me. We can obviously have different zoning requirements for different types of cannabis businesses, right? So we can have strong zoning away from schools for dispensaries and then less so for testing facilities and other things like that.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I figured.
Oh, are there any other questions? Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I just want to tag on what Councilmember Hundley was talking about with the testing of labs. You were making it sound like it was like getting your blood drawn and something really simple here. But could the council put limitations on how much product is at that testing lab? Because you seem like you just said that it's not like a big deal, but to me, that could be something that could be, for a criminal with theft. So would there be able to put a limit on how much product is in that testing facility at one time?
Again, a testing lab is going to get these little vials that the total, even if they say have 600 vials at one time, you're talking about less than probably 50 pounds. That is not on its independently by itself. It's not going to be of much use or value to anyone if they were going to try to divert it or steal it or rob it. That's not the place that will be done to that because there's so many chemicals that run through it that the quality of it isn't worth them to do that. The bigger concern would more is just the disposal of that waste or after its test. And there's state law requires how they have to dispose of that. And so as long as that's in place, then there hasn't been a concern, at least that we're aware about, that a testing lab has an issue that would be a public safety or welfare concern.
Thank you.
Okay, city manager?
So just two items that I'd like to have Mr. Henderson kind of elaborate on, based on some prior conversations we had. So one is parking, and and when you're talking about dispensaries, some of the volume, so that you've got a little bit of that context. So whether it's Katati and Mercy, which is a facility he's familiar with, but when you're thinking about this is another area in terms of potential requirements, putting higher parking requirements on a retail dispensary could be something. So I thought that may be a piece that he could elaborate a little more, and then I have one other item for him as well.
Yeah, so dispensaries usually are retail. Typically, will have, and not knowing what yours is, it's, like for every so square feet, you have to have so many parking spaces in there. In smaller communities like yours, where it's not in a big shopping mall, we've had experiences, where you have a common shopping mall with multiple businesses. It's not as big of an issue because there's more turnover of traffic and it's designed more for the flow of traffic. In the smaller communities, there are concerns regarding that ratio. So where if you're going to amend the zoning ordinance to reflect that, you may modify that if you have a concern for that, or you may stick to the standard flow that you've done through your normal general plan process of that. And then really about the buffers as far as how close they're together. If you've got a congestion regarding a parking issue, requiring a distance between one retailer to another retailer so that you do not have that traffic flow pattern problem or safety issues or concerns of loitering or people disposing of things on the street or things of that nature. We've seen combinations of things regarding that goes into a place in the consideration, and a lot of times that's addressed at the planning department before it comes to you, because obviously they got a little more specific on the concerns or issues to that. But if there's direction to be provided to that where we're in the early stage of drafting this, it would be good to know to present when we come back.
And then the other item is around buffers. So a conversation we had is let's say the youth serving facilities portion of the code is, it's very general as was described and you can define it. But let's say like the world of daycare. Let's say council says, I don't want a buffer. I don't believe that is necessary. Well, the recommendation here is to not make it a no buffer, do like a 25-foot buffer. So you do some minimal buffer. It doesn't sound like any agency on those required areas has done a zero buffer. And Mr. McPherson can speak to this. And we don't necessarily want to take the time to go figure that out with the state. But it is, so then you just do a reduced level of a buffer that would have, not necessarily an impact. So that I wanted him to speak to that as well.
Yeah, the state could still override your buffer zone. They typically will look at if there's a saturation or oversaturation of that. But because there's, to our knowledge, we do not know of an agency that's actually said no buffers for the 3 that are mandated, that there are buffers. It just says that you have to follow the parcel to parcel definition. But how far you have that apart is your discrepancy to do that. So the recommendation would be to put something in there, as the city manager had indicated there. And I use 25 as an example because you have a tobacco ordinance or a public consumption ordinance where there's a buffer in there. So having some kind of consistent standards that you would want to utilize would be a good minimum to use if you were going to establish something.
Sorry, just the last thing. If the council can pull the last map, and we'll put it up here on the projector for Community C as well. But I'll ask Mr. Storr, our planning director, just to talk to you about kind of the baseline map, which we handed out to you tonight.
While we wait to get that diagram up, I will just communicate to you that on map number 1, you'll notice that the mixed-use zoning district along the east and west sides of Broadway is not there. And so here we have east at the on the top of your page. Okay, well, we can use that. What you can see here is the purple. That would be the Broadway corridor. And if you went to high school on the blue spot there, you can see that it's upside down.
Yeah, we're not able to manipulate it, sorry, in this program.
So if I can just point, you see where the north arrow is facing the west?
You might want to look, council may want to look at the hard copy they have in front of you.
I think it can be flipped on this program.
Is it Adobe Acrobat Pro? Two ways you can flip this. You or under tools?
Tools.
Hey, there we go. Hey.
Oh, I thought it
Yeah,
was
3
reader.
chances. There we go.
I thought it was reader too.
Thank you.
So I'll point out the Broadway corridor again. You can see the high school on the east side of Broadway. Oops. And so the point of this diagram is to show you the baseline of the 600 feet of the state that David was talking about. And again, in the initiative diagram on map number 1, you'll see the absence of the purple along Broadway. I bring that to your attention for another reason. That is south of that mixed use zone, you'll see a kind of a brown color of some blocks there. At the intersection of Napa Road and Broadway, that is our commercial gateway zoning. So in addition to your commercial zone, you also have the CG zone. So in looking at the map, again, if you compare it to map number 1, you'll see the absence of some buffers that were provided almost 6 months ago or so, where you see some youth facilities at the very westerly side of West Napa Street that is no longer there, and also there's some uses in the community center that are no longer there. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. So when you use this particular map, you'll also see that the plaza has no buffer around it. And the reason I mention that is because on the initiative they did provide a 1,000-foot buffer. And that, if you want to kind of just superimpose that in your mind, that goes to the southerly portion of the commercial zone along Broadway. That would give you a rough 1,000-foot demarcation, if you will. The second map that Rebecca's just provided for you, again, is upside down, right? That sideways, yeah. And so what it does is it just shows you just very simply a buffer, if you will, if we use the prod, similar to what we are using currently for demonstration purposes with the wine tasting. You can see again that this particular geography is a lot smaller than the 1,000-foot buffer that I just talked about that's in the initiative. That concludes my comments for now.
Great, thank you. If there aren't any questions from council, we could take it out to the public for public comment.
I have one question.
Councilmember Harvey?
I have one question. There's on the first map, the colorful map, there's one school that's on 5th Street West that's circled, which is Sasserini. The one on West Napa Street, that's also circled. Is that SoloQuest?
It's SoloQuest,
Okay,
which
cool.
is a private middle school, high school, and then you've got St. Francis.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
those are the 3 that create that cluster.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll open it up to the public to make comments. All right, is there any public comment?
Well, Josette Brosiker, 1110 Loma Court, and this is much more complex than I thought it was going to be. So I don't know if what I'm going to say really is going to make any sense in light of all this, because hearing all the various things that are going on. But I will say I really appreciate that the council is moving forward with the study session. It makes me feel that things will get done quickly. And I want to tell you about my personal experience with the dispensary in Cotati. When I first went there, it was medical use only. And then after the law changed to adult use, they changed to both. I've seen no difference in how I go there. And I will kind of go off my thing here because there was a question about IDs. And the way it works there is when you first go in, you show your ID, and then you fill everything out, and they put you in the system. So you can't just walk in and show your driver's license and go and buy. So once you're in the system and they've checked everything out, then each subsequent time you come in, you show your ID and they bring you up in the system. And they've done that, they do that for both recreational and medicinal use. So it's pretty, it's much better than if you go to buy alcohol. If you go to buy alcohol, you go in and show your ID, and, it's subject to someone says, oh, that looks good, And the main thing I want to address is hiring HDL as a consultant on this. I personally think this is a wise thing to do, to make sure that what the council puts in place is studied and done in the best way that's for the community.
But there's lots and lots of people out there who's saying that this is a waste of time and money. So I would urge the council to reach out and have some community information sessions to try to get the local press to publish an analysis of why we have to do it this way. Because I think after seeing how complex this is, and you know, I read a lot on Nextdoor and I hear a lot of comments about what a waste of time and money this is and why are you doing this. And I think that if you want people to understand, you're going to have to really reach out to the community and make them understand that this is a complex process and has to be done right. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I, again, just want to applaud you for moving forward. This is an exciting time for our city. I'm Jewel Math. Do I need to say my name and where? Jewel Matheson, 1396 Lubeck Street. The one of the founding members of Sonoma Patient Group, our longest permitted dispensary in our county. We've been medical for over 10 years, and we now serve adult users. I just want to point out the irony of how many places in all these little circles where we're protecting our children that we dispense alcohol.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make a public comment?
David Eicher, also of Loma Court. So I think we should allow dispensaries and testing within the city. I'm not sure about the other manufacturing and cultivation because of the possibility of the odor issues with that. But many want to speak about buffer zones for dispensaries. I see really two, step back and what are the reasons you have buffer zones? And I can see two. One is you want to limit the children's exposures to the dispensaries. And two is you want to reduce cannabis use in public. So now for the buffer zones for the schools, youth center, and daycare, it doesn't quite make sense to me because the children are there. There are adults either supervising or close by. So you're not going to have people that have the cannabis going into the school. And then, so the other one is, so if the children walking by a cannabis dispensary and they get, oh my God, look, a cannabis dispensary. It's like, but as just mentioned, they're going to walk by the liquor stores and the wine tasting rooms. And liquor stores, you have a big bud sign out in front, or and so the wellness center in Cotati, all it has is this name. You don't know that it's a cannabis dispensary just by looking at it from the outside. So I don't understand why. Are you protecting your youth from what? But as far as the I think for parks, you may want to have a buffer zone so that you don't have people that just went in and purchased some cannabis, then can easily go to a park like right next door, and maybe I'll just go ahead and use it here and not wait till I get home. So I can see why you want to have buffer zones around the parks. In any case, I also want to thank you. It looks like it's going forward. We'll have something here in place in time so that we'll have the proper regulations before the 2020 initiative comes up. And I think that's very important that everyone knows that if they pass that, then there's going to be bigger, much bigger problems, potential problems than what you're doing with it right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. And I'll ask the city manager, how do you want to take our
So
feedback?
I'm going to ask Mr. McPherson to come back up. And I think what I'd like to also have the city clerk put kind of just that baseline boundary map back as well. This one. And then, council, you have in front of you the PowerPoint that I think what we're going to do is looking at what's called slide 21. These PowerPoint, the last 6 or 7 slides where there's a series of questions about each use. We're just going to go through each of those uses and we're going to take a straw poll on what do you want to do. And then we'll talk about kind of the buffer map. So I think that's why I think it'd be good to have the map up on your screens as well, but then we'll also be looking at this.
I think it's might be more efficient to ask each person to go through all of the uses instead of go through the uses person by person.
We can do that. I think there could be some dialogue on some of these a little bit, and my only concern about doing it that way, I think for us, we're walking out of here gonna write an ordinance, and so I really want some good clarity. And so I think it'd be helpful to kind of by topic, get direction, and then set that one aside, go to the next one. So if you bear with us, I think it will help us to be able to really make sure we've got clear direction. So let's start if we
Madam
can.
Mayor, so could I have clarification? So are we going to our screen and going to map 1, map 2? Is that what I'm hearing?
We're starting on page 21, and the first question will be retail dispensary, storefront versus non-storefront. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think for the main,
And where's page 20?
sorry,
It's slide 21.
I don't have that.
yeah, so council member actually, count,
I mean, I have it here. This,
Oh, on your iPad? It's in the board. It's on page 30 of the item of the staff.
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so my hope is each of you've got 2 screens in front of you, so you can keep both things up, if that makes
So I'm
sense. So,
looking for 21.
Yeah.
On the slide number 21.
yes.
There's no
Okay,
real-
is everyone,
It's page 40 of the packet.
yeah, it's on the iPad. On the iPad, it's what page of the iPad, Councilmember Hundley?
30.
Page 30. So page 30 on your iPad, on your agenda packet.
Boom.
Okay,
Bless you. Thank you so much.
all right. And then we'll
I
keep,
was there. I don't know how.
we'll keep this kind of base map up. So we can be looking at both things at the same time. So I'm going to turn now back to Mr. McPherson and ask David to walk us through, starting with dispensary, and have council members talk to us about what you want to happen here.
Okay, very good. So as we mentioned on slide 21, for retail, dispensary, and storefront, the first part of the question is, in what zones will this be permitted, or would like to consider?
Yeah, so there's 3 questions. It's where, and do you want more, starting with this base map, are you comfortable with what's here? And do you want to add more buffers? Also, how many permits? Remembering you can, again, there's the retail or storefront retail or non-storefront. So if whatever council member wants to start and talk about their vision of what they'd like to potentially propose in terms of regulations around dispensary.
So, could I ask, you explained storefront versus non-storefront. Could you do that again?
Sure, I'd be more happy to. Surprise you.
That's what we're.
So storefront is a retailer, just as you would walk in, as everyone's using the example of Katati Park. You go inside, you go through the process, go in and you buy it, touch, fill, and purchase it. A non-storefront picture, basically it's a fancier name for delivery. I call, just like Domino's Pizza, and I order it and it comes to me, but then where did it come from? Right? That's the fixed location that may be in your community. And so if somebody wanted or you permitted that to be operated, where are they going to be? Where they're going to park vehicles outside for staff to go out in their cars and deliver it after you call them, or download it off the internet and place the order together, package it all up, and then they drive it to your home and deliver it to you. That's a non-storefront retailer, which means there is no walk-in traffic in any shape or form, picking up or purchasing anything on site.
With respect to this, storefront versus non-storefront, are we talking medicinal or are we talking medicinal and recreational? I don't.
the council majority was medicinal and adult use. So at this point, we're talking medicinal and adult use for all of these businesses. So I think for the dispensary, let's start first. The first question I think for council to give us direction on is how many. So let's talk about this, and if it's more than, and then what type. So is it, how many dispensaries do you want? And are they storefront or non-storefront? And then we'll go to where.
Okay. Who would like to start? Okay, Councilmember Hundley.
For number, I would say up to 2, and either both storefront or one storefront, one non-storefront.
So 2 total.
2 total.
Councilmember Harvey.
Yeah, I'm fine with 2 total. I'd be okay with, yeah, that's fine with me. 2 total, 1 of each, 1 of both, or 1 of either. Honestly, I would probably be comfortable with 2 storefront retails and 1 non-storefront retail. That would be comfortable for me as well. But if the majority is for 1 and 1, or an option of both, or option of both, I think that works for me too.
Well, I would
Councilmember
prefer,
Agrimonti?
oh, sorry,
Sorry.
thanks. I would, I mean, I'm leaning toward, well, no, I'm not. This non-storefront makes more sense to me, but I'm not in favor of a dispensary. And I have to, you know, that's how I've gone this whole time.
Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I feel like I'm playing poker with no cards here. I have to agree with Councilmember Agrimonti. I am not for a dispensary in the city of Sonoma, but I am for a dispensary in the county. And I believe that that's where we're missing the boat on all of this.
And I support 1 storefront and 1 non-storefront.
Okay. So council majority then, what, so with the majority then, the 3, I'm hearing that there seems to be 2, support for 2. And again, looking now at combination, 1 storefront, 1 non-storefront,
Correct.
or 2 storefront. That's the
No.
direction I need next.
I don't support having 2 storefront.
Okay.
Okay. Then that's what we'll do.
All right. And Councilmember Hundley?
I mean, that's fine with me. I mean, really, with all of this, my biggest concern is traffic and parking, and I don't even know if there would be 2 places where that would fit. But I think that, I also think that as we roll this out, I would like to do it in a way that makes it successful. So having 1 store to think about, and then another business in town, but that's not going to have the same impact. So I think that's a good idea.
Okay. So I hear direction, 2 dispensaries, 1 retail storefront, and 1 non-storefront. Any other, and then we need to talk about buffer areas for the dispensary.
And if I may, for clarification on the retail one, are they going to also be permitted to do deliveries?
No? Yeah. For me, they would be. Yes.
I think it would depend on the location. If the location wasn't suited for some sort of the logistics of having a driver and that sort of thing. But it's fine with me.
So is it something that potentially is part of a conditional use permit based on the location if delivery makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, part of me kind of thinks like it would be good to know, I mean, if we're going to do 1 and 1, then it makes sense to be like, okay, here's the problems and issues or the lack thereof with delivery as an isolated case, and here's the problems and issues or lack thereof with a dispensary as an isolated case. And once we have both, I could see that kind of being a little bit more, it could be a little bit confusing to kind of really understand. It also limit the locations that a dispensary could be that is delivering as well. Maybe that's a positive, maybe that's a negative. So I have, a little bit concerns about allowing both uses. They really got to have access to easy ins and outs and all those kinds of things. I mean, but essentially, how is this that different than delivering pizza? And in all honesty, you're probably going to deliver more pizzas than marijuana deliveries, possibly. So, I don't know. We allow delivery of pizza right off the plaza. So, yeah.
I guess my thought about allowing delivery is that, we want to ultimately select the best retailers, and they'll have to comply with our parking regulations and put forward a proposal that makes sense. And I would like to see them be as successful as possible as a business. And it seems to me that having the ability to do all of the possible functions of that business would help them be successful. And so I just thought, if someone knows how to run a non-storefront dispensary well, and they can build their own business, that's great. And if we definitely need to make sure that our storefront business is a success, so that this whole process is a success. So that was kind of my thinking.
I don't really have any doubt that in terms of like customer base and ability to sell product, that a dispensary in Sonoma is going to have any problems being successful. So I don't think that they need a delivery option, and I think that's going to make it more difficult for the delivery or non-storefront spot to be successful. But my guess is, given the limited amount that exist in Sonoma County, Sonoma Valley, they'll probably be successful too. So, I don't think success is going to be determined by delivery or not, but I'm not opposed to allowing them to deliver, I guess. I just think adds more restriction, adds a little bit more complication as far as knowing how these things are affecting the city, but yeah.
I would just add that there's the question about whether delivery is just open anyway, and you can't, if there's going to be out-of-town companies that could just deliver anyway. I know that they have to figure out what exactly all of it means, the gray area, but...
That's just for medical, though, right? That's not recreation or adult use as well.
Oh, I don't know.
No, I think what Councilmember Hundley was referring to is the recent regulations that allow deliveries anywhere in the state by any company.
Isn't that just governing medical, though? Or is that's adult use as well? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Well, then, then it doesn't make sense to block our own dispensary from delivering.
My only comment at this point is don't get too bogged down in the details of whether there's access, whether there's parking issues that you need to address in a particular application. All those things will be resolved when you get the applications in front of you. It will be very flexible. The ordinances that we're drafting right now allow the city council, after receiving 13 applications for 57 different businesses, to say, nope, we're done. We're not going to do any of this right now. It's just too much. So you're going to have extreme flexibility to phase your permissions, your permits in. Even though you may agree tonight that there's going to be one non-storefront and one storefront retail, 2 distributors, 4 manufacturers, and 75 cultivation potential licenses. In actually rolling this thing out and implementing it, you could just approve 1 per 6-month period, for example, to see how it goes. and stagger or phase in the permits that you might want to allow to permit the establishment and operation of a cannabis business. So it's going to be a very flexible, dynamic process. Right now, we just need to have a structure that allows you to do what you might want to do to the max.
Okay, buffer zones.
Okay, so let's talk about buffer zones and location then. So again, the map in front of you shows the 600 feet around K through 12 schools, and would entertain a conversation with council about, what you think about this, and and then I know there's been conversation in the past about the plaza. Are there other restrictions or anything else you want to consider here?
Councilmember Harvey, Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yeah, either way. Cool. My primary concerns are going to be with high school and middle school students. I think they're more aware of it, more apt to be concerned with these things. Of course, there is a liquor store that also says cigarettes. It's basically directly across from the high school. But I'd like to keep the high school and Del Harrison buffer zones completely in place. I have some concerns as far as location of these dispensaries, and there's some areas of town that could use some different options for businesses. So I would be comfortable. I'd be comfortable keeping the state. I'd also be comfortable reducing slightly in St. Francis area and Sasserini area a little bit. I also think that where kids play Little League and things like that, I would not like to see a dispensary directly across the street. So I would like to add a buffer zone around the baseball field there. And then I don't think that the town necessarily should be having dispensaries directly on the plaza right now. I think that may be something that happens in the future. I think likely it is something that happens in the future. So I think that basically putting a line around the prod, the Plaza Retail Overlay District, is a good idea. I'm comfortable in both commercial and mixed use zones. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Hundley.
Yeah, I think we are we going to get to zoning, or do we skip over zoning?
I think he spoke a little bit about mixed use and commercial zoning, so,
Well, as far as our preference.
yeah, in terms of your preference, I think that's part of buffer and land use.
Okay. I would like to focus on the commercial zone, and I agree with the vice mayor that the high school is my biggest concern, mainly because there are 18-year-olds that go to school there, and I wouldn't want anything sort of they could get to during the day. But beyond that, especially with the daycares, I would support having a very small buffer, especially because the locations of daycares, they can be lots of places. And for youth areas, I mean, it just seems like it's like if we get into Little League fields, which I understand, the other place that I think about, which I just think that I want it to be something that's realistic. And again, I think that having sufficient parking is going to severely limit where places can go. But like I think about the Maxwell Shopping Center, but then I think about the Boys and Girls Club, the teen club there, and I would put that on my list of things that I would like to put a buffer around. But I don't know. It's like, can we make a short list without sort of expanding it and then going back to our original map that everything was basically excluded by default?
So let me ask that question to.
Yeah, I think our conversation about the youth facility definition. So if the YMCA or the Boys Club is a concern, you specifically define that as
to include
as
these
that.
things.
And the indication about the baseball fields, it says sports activities where soccer, baseball, such as soccer, baseball, are done by primary uses by youth. So both of those examples you give could put in the youth definition, so that whatever buffer you designate in the distance will be in that definition.
Okay.
Yeah, and for me, like when you look at the map, just where the Little League field is, there's a commercial zone that's directly across the street. So see the purple thing that's like just south of First Street West, where they've been wanting to build stuff.
This way's west. Oh, up here.
Or east. Or
East?
First
Oh,
Street
east.
Yeah,
Sorry.
east. Yeah,
Sorry.
they see the purple. Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
So that's my concern. That's why I want to target that area, because there's a commercial zone that has a lot of parking.
Is that commercial?
It's mixed use.
Or mixed use zone. Sorry.
Yeah, mixed use, which I think that mixed use, although I really like that zoning, I think that for now it is a natural way to separate these kinds of uses from residential uses. So that's why I only think the commercial zone right now.
I mean, are you comfortable in allowing these things in places like Whole Foods parking lot and stuff like that, First Street West, areas like that?
I think shopping centers would be the most appropriate places to put these.
And then I think when we're doing security and stuff like that, for me, if we can determine what they're named, it's going to be less likely that people know what's in there. And then we can also require IDing. I mean, people are going to know. People are going to know. But restrictions on signage and name and things like that, like if it's not called cannabis, whatever. I think that's gonna reduce how much they know. And then the fact that they're being ID'd at the front before they even enter the building, I think is like a really big changer thing.
So, are you done?
No, I have one more comment. Going on that, well, I agree. The security process is very successful, which is why, for me, the high school is my real concern, because an 18-year-old with a medical card, I believe, can go in and purchase things. And that is the one instance where you would find someone that's high school age without a parent at a dispensary.
So I support maintaining the state buffers. I support creating a buffer in the Plaza Retail Overlay District. I also support not having them near the ball fields on First Street East. That's about it for me. I'm open.
Services Center in Maxwell?
I could support that, but it's not.
We can make it a smaller overlay. So
I mean, one of the questions there is parking. You know, can the parking requirements could be altered so that there's additional parking required. That parking lot's already very crowded. So, in addition to the youth question, there's not really available parking at that shopping center anyway. So, I don't know.
That park, that shopping center does get used by the Maxwell Park folks. Having talked to the property manager there, so I know that that's part. I mean, parking is definitely an issue at that shopping center.
Yeah, between the gym and then assuming the restaurant opens again, it's very crowded there anyway. So I guess we could have additional requirements with regard to parking in a shopping center, correct? That's a question for David Storer.
A question about the library.
I just want to have that answered first.
Thanks.
Yeah, I
sorry.
believe you'll be able to do that with your parking standard. Currently, we have a 1 to 300, and if there's a concern about parking, you can make it more liberal so you will require less parking. But on the other hand, we know that these facilities have a different or a unique pattern of in and out operations, so we could have to take a look at that to see if we need to require more parking and then do the math against an existing shopping center, figure out how it works.
But wasn't one of the points that there,
Councilmember Agrimonti's next.
Oh, thank you. I just want to know, libraries, are there any thoughts about the buffer zone at that? Because, I mean, they have,
I think that I don't support having an additional buffer zone around a library. I think that getting marijuana in a dispensary is much more difficult for people than getting it like at the high school maybe. I think it's a very difficult place to obtain marijuana, and the people that are running it, who have the license, have so much invested in it that they are highly disincentivized to sell to teens or to have any of their products going to youth. So I don't think that young people will have access to it. So the question is seeing it, and I think a lot of seeing it has to do with the signage that Councilmember Harvey talked about. Councilmember Harvey.
I think, as far as the library is concerned, I would be comfortable if we could create a buffer zone that was small enough that would block off the existing commercial businesses that are directly inside of the library parking lot. There's like a studio in there, and there's like another couple things. If we keep that from going cannabis, I would be supportive of that. But to me, the library is such a back entrance place. It's such a contained unit that I feel like you don't really see the street from the library. Pretty much you go in the back parking lot and you go directly into the library and then you leave. You don't have that much interaction with West Napa Street, at least when I've been over there. And there's some businesses over there that have opportunity. The trouble for me with this map is it's really hard to. I have a few questions. Like, one, are we talking about the interior of the gray line is where the limit is, or is it the exterior? And then it's hard for me to understand what businesses or what locations I'm limiting because, it's not zoomed in on specific areas and things like that. Like with the St. Francis one, okay, does this go far enough to where it's like the same facility where Copy Store and More is in that area, or does it not touch that? I can't tell from this, really. It doesn't look like it does, but.
Yeah, the actual buffer lines themselves are probably about the width of a street too. So when you use it to scale, Jeff and I were just talking about the actual demarcation. That is property line to property line. And that also applies to a shopping center. So for example, if you've got one tenant space inside a shopping center, the buffer's around the property. All of it.
See, that's a problem. I'm glad that came out.
So one thing I think that, this is why it's like, where do you want it? So if you tell us, for example, that currently the map, let's say it cuts in part of the Whole Foods and you want to build allow Whole Foods, then you tell us you want to build allow the Whole Food shopping center to be a site. And then we will go, again, working through kind of to look at, well, what would be a buffer zone that would then allow that to occur. So part of it is what do you want to see, and then we can adjust and drill this into a little bigger detail.
I'm actually uncomfortable with that approach because I prefer to set the broad parameters of what the zoning is, like any other business, and then have the business operator select the location from the available businesses. I mean, I understand why you're saying that, and it's logical. I prefer not to pick the location, and I think I would prefer for if someone in the industry to pick the location based on zoning.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying to pick the location. It's like, but if you want a shopping center to be an option, that's what I'm saying. If you want it to be an option, then we can craft a buffer zone maybe that's 550 feet, and then you still have got some buffer, but it's in. So that's really kind of that was the point I was trying to make.
Well, I think that the two shopping centers, Sonoma Market and actually Safeway, and the one that's across the street from that right now, I would be interested with a more refined map with buffer zones on those two shopping centers, because I think about how we have our formula retail store ordinance where it drives certain kinds of businesses to shopping centers and only shopping centers. It's just that's like seems like when we have a full package of all of our requirements and all of our parking and everything, it might be that the only thing that's left is shopping centers.
Which shopping centers did you say again?
Well, there's the three, Sonoma Market, Safeway-ish, and then the one that's, where Old Pearl's Diner was. Okay. Like on here it says, looks like, maybe the Old Pearl's would be, but then like the Old Crush wouldn't be. It's hard to know.
So for me, I think Whole Foods, in terms of the Whole Foods parking lot, in terms of parking, is one of the best options. The Safeway one, there isn't really a spot because Safeway dominates that entire thing unless the Scuderia decides to start changing their business model in a significant fashion. I don't have concerns too much with Pearls other than parking issues there, especially once Taco de la Hacienda opens up. I think it's going to be relatively popular. There's already a cigarette store in there, so it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just like, the whole thing with like, we can't have cannabis, but we can have a cigarette store like that far from the elementary school. That's what I mean. So I think it's a lot more useful to be like, what sort of businesses do we want it in, or what areas do we want it in? Then and then do the lines have to be a circle? Do we have to go 500 feet, or can we make a little whoop?
Well, I think there is discretion to modify the state 600, correct, for the schools?
Yeah, I think the question though from Vice Mayor Harvey is, what if let's say we want 600, but we want this parcel to be an option, so we're going to carve the circle down to 500 feet on this one, so it's not a pure 600-foot buffer. I mean, we can carve, I think my sense is, again, we can carve these buffer. These are going to be pictures. We could either do 600 feet, or you can say around these parcels. I mean, you could carve it more deliberately, so there's not a question of, well, it's partially in and partially out. And we might want to do that to be really clear. These parcels are in and these parcels are out.
What if we just started from what there was the most restrictive instead of so maybe I'm like the least restrictive, and Councilmember Hundley suggested the most restrictive, which to come to consensus we'll have to settle on that. So the most restrictive is commercial only, and then what were your buffer zones?
State 600 feet on K through 12 schools, and then a small buffer around daycares, and then there was the question about some youth things.
So Councilmember Harvey.
So to be clear, that would exclude Safeway, the commercial shopping center across from Safeway, and the Maxwell Shopping Center, as well as, I think, the Whole Food Shopping Center.
Well, aren't we doing the most?
I was just saying, if you continue to only want it in the commercial zones, then that's the most restrictive, then we would meet you at the point, presumptively meet you at the most restrictive, because,
As opposed to what, allowing mixed use?
so I suggested the state buffers plus the Plaza Retail Overlay District plus around the ball fields.
Well, the state buffers technically include daycares and youth centers. So that would be.
I meant the ones that are shown, so the ones that are shown on the
State
current
law
map.
has 3 categories: schools, daycares.
So the buffers that are shown on the current
Yes.
map only, plus the ball field, plus the Plaza Retail Overlay District is what I'm suggesting.
I would take this map and I would exempt the shopping centers, and that was what I think I would like.
What about the plaza?
The plaza, I think, in theory, is actually an amazing place to have a dispensary, particularly down one of the alleys. However, I don't think that I would want to put that in the first phase of this. I would like to get something going well and then really think about it, because the one thing that the plaza cannot provide is parking. It's impossible. So we'd have to have something completely different for that. So, not right now.
Councilmember Harvey, dude.
So, no mixed use, only commercial is kind of what's on the table, and we kind of have to go with the most restrictive.
I don't think so. Didn't you just say, were you saying that you agree with the current plus shopping centers plus ball fields and the Plaza Retail Overlay District?
Yes, my concern about mixed use is that there will be more situations where you're going to have residential right next to a dispensary, which I think could cause a lot of conflicts, because I know some people do buffers from residential zones, which I don't want to get into, but mixed use, I just think it's going to get complicated, and that we might have a lot more conflict.
Okay, so of this map that we're currently looking at, only commercial, excluding and then including the shopping centers.
Correct.
Okay, you were right.
And that would automatically exclude the mixed use zone next to the ball field, because it's not a commercial zone.
Yes.
Cool. And then not excluding Maxwell Village Teen Service Center, we're gonna allow that.
I think I just would want to talk about that specifically, because I don't know with the buffers, I guess it's the whole parcel, so it would have to be if there was another solution. Well, and the parking, that might be something that is not an option anyway.
How much do you need from us tonight?
I think what you've given us right now in terms of, so here's what I hear is kind of consensus direction on this. So 600, what the map that's here in front of us, which is 600 feet from schools, exempting any shopping center. I want to be clear, though, shopping center also includes, so it's Sonoma Market, Whole Foods, where Rayleigh's is. I also heard kind of that, what maybe it's a little more of a strip commercial center where Pearl's is, not necessarily a shopping center, but I heard interest to have that exempted as well from if it's within the 600 feet. And then it's the prod and commercial zoning only.
I'd also like to exempt, I don't know if it's Plaza Retail delivery.
I'm saying I do not want to include the prod right now.
No, excluded.
Oh, excluding. All
Sorry.
right.
Sorry, talk about.
I'd also like to exempt, I don't know if this map touches it, because I can't tell, but if it is touching it, the shopping center has Copy Store and More, and the Buddhist Meditation Center. They've had a spot there that's been open forever.
Exclude the shopping center on First Street West.
It abuts where Whole Foods entrance is. So it's like right after that on West Napa Street. You know what I'm talking about? Like right across from
It's
where
kind
the
of behind,
Stoppers
it's kind of
office
behind
used
the
to be.
kind of behind the toy store.
Yeah.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a viable location with good parking and.
Okay.
Yeah, there's parking in the back there.
Yeah, especially for like a delivery only. That'd be.
Okay.
Okay. Is there?
And I guess the only other question is, just to be clear, is this for the storefront and the non-storefront?
Yeah, even though I have even less problems with the non-storefront, I think it'd be easier if we just kept the same thing for everybody.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. McPherson, that you wanted to ask?
No, I think they clarified the the mixed use, I would say that would be a consideration because there's no walk-in traffic, that if you wanted to have more flexibility in the land than the mixed use for the non-storefront, if your concerns are walk-in traffic, it's gone. So the concerns of mixed use might be modified as a result of that.
I agree with that. So I'd be fine with,
Non-storefront.
yeah, non-storefront.
Do we
I
want
guess having different requirements after all, but
That's
just
what I was thinking.
opening up mixed use for non-storefront.
do we want to do the same thing for testing facilities, manufacturing?
Testing facilities for sure. Manufacturing, I think we have to talk about more.
Great.
So I would agree that for non-storefront, that having it in the mixed use as well, subject to the buffer zones, is good.
And then with that, because you've got the mixed use up by the Little League fields, would you create a buffer for
Oh,
the mixed
right.
use
Yeah, I would.
to
Yeah.
prevent the Little League? Okay.
Thanks.
So, can I ask just one question? I know this is a little out of order in the next slide, but since we're talking dispensaries right now, I just want to hear from council in terms of outside delivery. And so the question here is, and I just want to, does council have the ability, if they want to regulate and say no outside delivery, you can only do delivery from your 2 local dispensaries? Do they have that option?
So state law says you cannot prohibit them at this time. And again, it's have to defer that to the attorney for clarification of his position.
That's the result of that recent regulation by the Bureau of Cannabis Control, which is clearly in flux, but I'm fairly confident that it's going to be struck down. But we're not there yet.
Okay, so we may come back at a point to kind of revisit that as a little further.
Clean it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide, which is cultivation. So first, I think on this one is this a yes or a no?
I
Do you
don't
want
think we ever had a
cultivation?
majority that was interested in cultivation.
Yeah, I don't think that
Right? Oh, we're just confirming.
Okay,
I do
no
not.
interest in cultivation, so moving on.
Cultivation, no.
Next option is manufacturing. So question first is manufacturing, yes or no? And if so, how many? And then we'll talk more specific.
Who would like to begin?
I don't have enough information about manufacturing to really answer this question, to be honest with you. I think that manufacturing of food goods is largely acceptable. I'm comfortable with that. I don't know if we have any areas or any businesses here that would be appropriate for manufacturing of goods or, food products. I don't think that we have any that would be appropriate for more volatile forms of manufacturing. This is a subject I need to learn more about, but I don't know. I don't know right now.
Yeah, the only ones I think you maybe called it a type 6 or what's the N?
N is where they're just, that's the one I indicated to you that they would do the get the oils and actually just do the packaging of the stuff. It could be putting oils in vape pens. It could be packaging. It can be a combination of things without actually extracting anything for the product.
Yeah, the only manufacturing I would consider would be sort of post-extraction and sort of dealing with that. And I'm not sure. I mean, I would also be fine with putting this one in phase 2 and not doing that one right now so we can think about it more. But I just do think that there could be, just given the fact that we already do have a lot of cottage food being made in Sonoma, that there would be an opportunity there. But I say we can talk about it now, or we can put it on a back burner.
I support doing a type N. When we went to the manufacturing facility and saw how they were making, I think they were making chocolate covered almonds or something. It was a very small. It was really not very large at all.
It's tiny.
And all it was they had the nuts and they had the chocolate with the marijuana and they painted it on there and then they put it in a machine that dried them. It was really small, and so to the extent that they're good jobs, it doesn't take up that much space. And I actually was surprised that that's how it was done. But it could be done in town, and it was not.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it's not volatile chemicals that you're working with. There's no chances of, I mean, there's no higher chances of electrical, or, fires or things like that. So that seems to make sense to me. To do, type N it's already been produced. The tinctures or the oils or the shatter, whatever they're going to use, has already been produced. And I don't know if we have local dispensaries that are using locally produced food. It kind of keeps in keeping with the traditions of Sonoma in that way, kind of a new form, but.
Like the Cocoa Planet that closed, that could have easily been a manufacturing facility very easily. So
Wouldn't have been allowed because it's too close to the thing.
we didn't say we're allowed.
So then the question is, so I hear support for like, Dave's the expert here, kind of a type in, but basically food infusion, nothing volatile. But I mean, so it's
I
really
also put like health products,
health products. Okay.
like topicals.
Okay, so health products, topical food, folks are combining things, but they're doing no extraction, so there's no volatile. What about limits in terms of numbers?
I mean, I'd be comfortable starting with one.
So I have another question on this, actually. I get maybe this would get into a dispensary thing, but I mean, is there the development right now in the cannabis industry of like cannabis infused food, like restaurant type uses? Does that exist in California at the moment? Is that?
Well, if a product has cannabis in it, it currently has to be sold through a dispensary or retailer facility. So whatever they experiment with it as a product, if it's a pizza or butter or whatever, just like the chocolates and that, it goes through the retailer aspect. It's not sold in restaurants. You get anywhere where there's alcohol or FDA, your health department hasn't approved. They're not there yet. I mean, there's been a lot of conversations with hemp, but there's no regulations as far as how it's doing outside of a regulated environment.
And a type N would only allow the manufacture, but not the distribution or sale of those things. I mean, to an individual consumer. Obviously, to other businesses, you could sell it, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the type P, just for clarity, is just processing. So there, it could be doing the packaging, it could be doing the labeling, it could be doing the pre-rolling. So it has a similarness to the type N. If your concern is no extractions, a P would probably fall in that same ballpark.
Oh, okay.
So in terms of numbers,
I'd be fine starting with one.
Yeah, I'd be fine starting with one, and I mean, after what you just said, I have no problem with NP, if you want to do it that way.
okay. And what about locations?
I would say the same as the non-storefront.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, Dave, that you need? Okay, testing. First, yes or no, and number.
Yes, one, same as non-storefront.
Yes, one, same as non-storefront.
I agree. Although I'm interested to see if we have any. I guess if no one shows up, then we can talk about it in 2 years.
Yeah, considering there's 46 in the state, like, it'd be cool if we got one and be successful.
Okay, and then Dave, do you want to talk about the micro business, just to remind council on that one?
Yeah, so one of the scenarios here is because of where you said no to cultivation, so you're down to 3 or 4, and you got really restrictive on the manufacturing, so you got it more defined that it would be very difficult to limit to someone if you only did the N and the P. If you did a type 6, you probably would be open to this. The other issue here is your zoning, because now that you've restricted zonings with the retail component of this, someone could be doing manufacture as an N and P only, and distribution if you permit it, which you haven't got to yet, and then do a non-storefront retailer. That'd have to combination, since you're allowing only 1 or 2. If you're not allowing a third retailer or a non-storefront retailer, one of the 2 that you're permitting would have to qualify and use up one of your 2 retailers under this category.
I am fine with not having a micro business now, and we can deal with it later. If that seems appropriate, and we wanted to increase the number of permits.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's might be the scenario where somebody existing wants to expand, and that would be something to address later. I could see though, like the non-storefront having the option of being one or the other, or being a manufacturer. But I'm fine with not doing that right now.
Okay. Oh, I mean, honestly, I would be fine if, I'm comfortable with 2 storefront dispensaries and 1 non-storefront, so I would be cool if there was a manufacturer that also sold their product. I mean, I'm comfortable with that, but I think I also have a lot of kind of feeling that going a little bit slower with this is good, so we can move into that later. I mean, that seems to be the council majority direction, so let's do that, but I'd be comfortable with it.
Did we leave distribution off on the?
I think I may have skipped it by accident, so let me, you want to talk about distribution?
Yeah, I don't know if I even.
No, I think the slide, the slide got dropped somehow, Dave.
Yep, I think it did.
So do you want to talk
What's
about
the question about
distribution?
distribution? Is it just whether or not we would allow one of these dispensaries to also be their own distributor?
Well, it's one of 2 ways. If you want to allow distribution for transport only so that one of the businesses in towns can move their own product, or strategically a distribution, someone may strategically say this is a good location with all the cultivation going on around her to have a distribution site on one, whatever you may permit them to be zoned in. And they have no involvement with any other part of the business other than basically they're distributing. They're moving it up and down the state as far as location for that. And in some cases, there are people that are going all the way to Humboldt, Mendocino, and they can't get all the way to the other side of the state and are looking for a touching point so that to do the distribution, to move it to the Bay Area. And that's what a distribution could do too, not just for the business.
I think the natural site for something like that is out on 8th Street for sure. You're going to have to store a lot of product, and you're going to have to be moving things logistically in a lot of different directions. So to me, 8th Street seems like the best place to distribute large volumes of cannabis. And I'd also have concerns with the storing of that much cannabis if they were moving a lot of products. So that would be a concern. As far as an individual dispensary moving product from there, if you have somebody who's more vertically integrated and they have product, or they have a farm and then they want to move their own product to their own dispensary, I'm comfortable with that personally, but having them become a large distributor that's moving stuff around, I wouldn't want to see that in city limits, but on 8th Street, I've got no problem with it.
So is that consideration for distribution transport only?
Yes.
Wait, so what is that called again?
So a distributor for transport only means I own my manufacturing facility and I want to move my own product, so I'm going to get that distribution license, or I'm the retailer and I want to be able to go pick up my products from other facilities, and so I'm going to bring it to my own retailer without having to have a middleman and pay him 20%, 30% margins to bring it to me or move it.
And so then a question would be whether we would not allow it or accept it, because it seems like if they're cultivating, for example, they're coming from out of the city, but then would they be cultivating and then coming back around and selling it after?
So let's use that as an example. Let's say I have a cultivator out of the area in Sonoma County, and I'm a retailer and I want to buy flower from that cultivator. Instead of having a distributor that I got to pay to do it, I now have my own distribution license. I can pick up my own products from those and bring it to my retailer and keep my costs down and be competitive.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
I agree, it's fine.
I have a quick question on that, but that, if you were a vertically integrated company, us not blocking distribution inside the town would not prevent them from distributing to multiple different dispensaries from outside of the city, right? So like if we say you can't do non-transport distribution, you can't do like generalized distribution inside city limits, you can still be a dispensary or a company that owns a cultivation site and multiple dispensaries and distribute to those, or you could be a place that has a cultivation and a dispensary site and then distribute to your own, but also other ones, as long as it's done outside of the city. We wouldn't be affecting their business model as far as things that happen outside of the city. Do you understand my?
The goal of that, the distributor, if it's at the same location of their current business, and to say the retail, then I'm only moving product to bring it to my retailer because that's where my permit is. But if I'm moving it to other activities, then I would be limited to unless I own those other businesses. So I think the other scenario you had was if I'm vertically integrated, so let's say I have a cultivation facility in Sonoma County, but I own it as part of my business, but it's not in the city, then yes, I could go get transport only, go grab my flower from my cultivation facility in Sonoma County and bring it to my retail, but I can't do anyone else's, only my own businesses.
So even if yeah, that's my question is, can you do both, but you just can't do it from inside city limits? Like, could you have a distribution site that's somewhere else that you could then do that? Because I don't want to limit the types of businesses that we get in here. And I feel like somebody that's vertically integrated, that's a little bit larger of that size, is going to be a better manager of the business, is going to have more experience. So I'd want to be able to say, okay, if you have somebody who distributes, you've got a big cultivation site, you distribute to dispensaries that you don't own, I want you to be able to transmit your cannabis to your dispensary that you have in the city, but I don't want that foothold in the city to exclude you from doing it if you ship to other businesses yourself.
You will not be able to ship to others as a transport only. You could only do your
So
own.
the dispensary could only ever be a transport only,
To their own
period,
business.
even if their distribution center sites are outside of city limits.
Well, they're two different things, though. This is just allowing, like, a dispensary to go get their stuff. They're not, like, being in the business of distributing. They're just going to get their own stuff.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm just asking.
Rather than being in the business of distributing, then you're just, like, dropping stuff off everywhere.
Yeah, but you could do all of it, right? You could have a big cultivation site. You could distribute to your own self, your own stuff, and then you could sell that stuff to other people. In that case, you're distributing like a whole hog distributor that just does that, right? So if you're a
It
business,
just wouldn't be the transport distribution. That's different.
But they're not limited from, even if, let's say you're a distributor somewhere it's allowed, if we allow you to go to your own farm or whatever to get the product and bring it to your dispensary, if you happen to also be a distributor in somewhere else, you're not limited. Is that correct?
No, you're not limited
Yeah.
out, but because again, it's, if I have a distribution license outside of the city, I can do it because I'm doing whatever I do under that other distribution
Exactly, yeah.
license.
and you can still have a place inside the city.
Yeah, but the logic won't be I won't need a transport only because I will have a
it's just-
distribution
that was my
outside.
question. It's
Yeah.
just like, is that going to block you from being able to open up a dispensary in Sonoma if you have a distribution license?
No,
They're not-
no,
literally-
only testing lab. You can't have a testing
They're not
lab.
mutually exclusive doing
Right.
both.
Again, the goal is
That
to
was my
just,
question.
do I want the UPS to deliver something or do I pick it up myself? And that's what the transport only would do.
Okay. So I think all three for transport only.
Yep.
Is that the final question?
Yes, I think that's the,
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Two options. One option is we could take a 2-minute break and stand up, or the other option is we can proceed. How would the council like to handle this? Okay, we'll take a 3-minute recess. Thank you. And we are going to continue item 6.2 to our next meeting. Is that sufficient? Kathy?
Yes, we can, we'll carry 6.2, which is the conversation about the CASA compact, and we'll bring that to the next council meeting. And maybe while I'm having Sue Casey, our assistant city manager, come up and get situated for 6.3, does council mind if we maybe talk about 6.4 next, just to keep it moving while Sue gets set up?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's fine. And
Keep it moving.
I just want to note our city attorney wasn't feeling well all day, but he has gone home now.
Okay.
So.
How will we know about the
Okay,
law?
so item 6.4, consideration, discussion, and possible action to nominate one council member to be put forward for consideration for the Parks for All Measure M Oversight Committee, or direct staff to proceed with a recruitment process. City Clerk.
I'll make this very quickly. The Parks for All Measure M was enacted by the voters at the November election. It established a 1/8 cent sales tax countywide, which was to support not only the county's regional parks, but also the incorporated city parks throughout the county. A requirement of that measure was that a citizens oversight committee would be formed, and that was, the purpose was to provide transparency and to ensure financial accountability in regards to those funds collected. The committee will be a 7-member committee, and per the language of the ordinance, Sonoma County Board of Supervisors will choose at least 2 members of that committee from a list of names that are submitted by all of the mayors in the Sonoma County, the cities in Sonoma County. And then each member will directly appoint one, each board member will directly appoint 1 member to the committee. At this time, staff is asking council to either consider putting forward one of your names for consideration or direction to move forward with a recruitment. You could also choose to take no action and not submit any names or put any names forward for consideration by the board. In the staff report, one thing of note, it talks about the recruitment, if you go that route, taking place in line with this council's commission and committee appointment policy. Because this is not a appointment, you are not making an appointment, you are making a nomination for consideration. That's not specifically addressed, and I thought about that today, and I talked with the city attorney about this. There is a distinction, and that's not addressed in your policy. So you could give, we could go forward with recruitment, since that's the way it's agendized, if that's what you chose. But you could say you want to give authority to, have someone put in applications, and then the mayor could just review those and put a name forward. You could go that direction if you so choose. You wouldn't have to go through the interview process and come back for ratification by the council just to submit a name for consideration. And unless you guys have other questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any council questions? Are there any members of the public that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and open it up for council discussion and a motion. Oh, Councilmember Hundley.
I think, because I saw that it's called the Citizens Commission.
Citizens Oversight. Mm-hmm.
Citizens Oversight Commission, so I feel like it would be something to put out to the public and go that route, and I would be fine with giving the mayor authority to pick who we're going to submit. But then on the other hand, the list is compiled and then the whole list is just sent to the Board of Supervisors and they decide?
It's a list compiled by all the cities in the county submit names, and the Board of Supervisors, that's where our participation ends, and the Board of Supervisors makes the recommendation or the appointment from any of that pool.
Interesting. Yeah, it's just hard to know what their selection criteria is, because it'd be nice to have someone definitely from Sonoma on there.
Yeah.
So
I think our Alcaldessa is a strong candidate if she were to choose to apply.
I think I agree. So
I would.
Yeah.
I'd say we put it out and then you can decide.
And I think we would want to, if there is interest in moving that direction, I think we'd want to make it very simple. It'd be basically having people submit some kind of,
They have to submit an application, a county application. This is a chance to talk to you as you were in a meeting.
Well, that would be to only be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors.
But in order to,
for Amy to pick who. She picks who it is and who's going to be on the list, and then they
And
do
then
the
that application would be forwarded to the board. That was the direction that was, that was what was sent to us from the county, were the county's applications.
We couldn't have our own separate application requirements and then just use the county application for the finalists.
Is it lengthy?
Purpose would be.
Yeah, well, maybe we can keep this direction from council. Maybe there's some of these details you could kind of trust staff to do, but potentially if, I'm just trying to keep it simple, let's say there's 6 people that want to put in an application and they send just an email interest with some background, and then if it is, then the mayor then picks, well, these are the 3 names of the 6 I want to put forward, and those 3 folks have to go fill out the application to be submitted. That way, if someone's not being selected, they don't have to go through the rigmarole of filling out a form. So we could potentially go that direction if that's an interest of the council, looking at how to make it easy on applicants and easy on staff and yourselves.
Sounds good to me. Anyone else?
Okay, so can I have a motion and direction?
I would like to make a motion to direct staff to advertise applications of some sort
Call
for
it a interest, yeah, kind of a
Letters of
communication,
interest.
letters of interest.
to be compiled and forwarded to the mayor, who will select the names to be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors, who will then fill out the county application.
Second.
And just as a note to your comment about the alcaldesa, I did speak with Karen. She approached me about this at the reception, and she is very interested.
Well,
and I
great.
think she was actually going to approach Supervisor Gorin.
Wonderful.
So
Good.
this was an FYI.
Sweet.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yeah.
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so are we going to go back to item 6.3 now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Item 6.3 is discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution updating the city's reserve policies for the general fund and water utility fund. Assistant City Manager, Ms. Casey.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington and City Council members. I'll try and make this brief. So tonight we're recommending several changes to the city's current reserve policies, including the addition of the water utility fund reserves. So why are we updating? The city has had a general fund reserve policy in place for many years, but it was last updated in 2006. And so we're taking a look at it just to make sure that we're up to date. In February 2009, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB, issued statement number 54, fund balance reporting and governmental fund type definitions. And so these new definitions were just to improve the usefulness of governmental fund balance information. It doesn't change the amount or overall calculation of fund balance. It just simply provides clarification on the intended use of the various fund balances. So the new fund balance classifications are non-spendable fund balances, and these are amounts that can't be spent because they are either not in a spendable form, for example, inventories or prepaid expenses, or they are legally or contractually required to be maintained intact. For example, the principle of an endowment fund. And the City of Sonoma does not have any non-spendable fund balances at this point. And then there's the restricted fund balances. And these are amounts that have external limitations on use, and the limitations can be imposed by creditors or grantors or by constitutional provisions, legislation, laws, and government regulations. And again, the City of Sonoma does not have any restricted fund balances at this point. And then there's the committed fund balances, and these are amounts that the City Council or City Manager has taken formal action to use by resolution. And then we have assigned fund balances, and these are amounts that the City Council or City Manager has expressed intention for use, but has not taken any formal action to commit. And then finally, we have unassigned fund balances, and that's a residual balance that's not classified in any of the above categories and available for expenditure. So the city currently has 3 general fund reserves. We have the emergency reserve, which would provide operating and or repair funds in the event of a local disaster or catastrophic event. And this reserve is currently set at 17% of annual operating revenues. We have the operating reserve, which would provide funding to evaluate alternatives in the event of financial hardships, provide resources in times of economic uncertainties and downturns, and to provide funding due to unexpected expenditures or reductions in revenues. And this reserve is currently set at a flat $1.5 million. And then we have the Special Projects Fund, and this reserve is to segregate surplus fund balance from recurring revenue sources. And we use those surpluses to be appropriated only for non-recurring expenditures, such as capital improvement projects, surveys, studies, and analysis of both operating and capital needs, updates of adopted plans, such as the general plan or specific general plan, or the facility master plans, and then temporary service programs, for example, eliminate duration, code, or traffic enforcement effort. So staff is recommending several changes to the city's current reserve policies, including the addition of the Water Utility Fund Reserve. And the changes include adopting the new fund balance classifications of GASB 54. We're not recommending any changes to the level of the city reserves. Back in August, when we first presented the changes in the reserve policy, staff was directed to review what occurred during the last recession with city revenues. And in the supplemental report on pages 8 and 9, a worksheet and graph display the city's general fund major revenue totals for fiscal year 06-07 through fiscal year 16-17. And they include property tax, sales tax measure M, and TOT. And as a worksheet and graphs depict, starting in fiscal year 08-09, all the general fund major revenue sources begin to decline. And the major general fund revenue losses between 08-09 and 11-12 total approximately $2.9 million, and it took almost 5 years to recover that lost revenue. So the recession that occurred between those years, it was kind of, it was referred to as the Great Recession, and it was a really prolonged and deep economic downturn. However, the analysis staff completed indicates that the 17% of annual operating revenues or expenditures should be sufficient to provide time to adjust should another prolonged downturn in the economy occur. Therefore, staff is recommending that the current 17% of reserve level be maintained. And for fiscal year 1819, just for your reference, was the general fund operating reserve was budgeted at 17% of discretionary revenue, or about $3.2 million. So in addition to the GASB 54 designations, staff is also proposing that the operating reserve be switched from a flat $1.5 million to 17% or 2 months of annual general fund operating expenditures. And that would really, for if we had budgeted that, it would be about $3.3 million, which is a little bit more than the revenues. This is a more standard practice for operating reserves, and it's logical that it be tied to operating expenditures rather than revenues. And it's also recommended by the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. And then the emergency reserve changes would be that it be switched from the 17% of operating revenues to a flat $1.5 million. Having a flat dollar amount for emergency reserve is also a much more standard and customary practice for this type of reserve. And then finally, a key recommended change in the general fund special projects reserve is to reclassify it as a committed reserve instead of a fund. The current policy states a special projects fund is hereby created into which shall be transferred any undesignated fund balances in the combined general fund and EMS fund. So GASB standards state that governmental units should establish and maintain only those funds required by law and sound financial administration. We currently have 51 funds. Unless a financial resource is required to be accounted for in a different fund, it should be accounted for in the general fund. And GASB 54 allows reserve funds to be committed by council resolution or assigned by council or the city manager for specific purposes, which is the exact intent of this reserve policy. And it does appear that the Special Project Reserve Fund has never been established. However, all other objectives of the policy have been followed, utilizing a committed or assigned reserve designation. In 2018, the city updated its water rates and conducted a comprehensive review of the city's water utility fund. And this was done to just help ensure that the city will continue to provide high-quality, dependable water service while maintaining financial stability, affordability, and adequate levels of investment in infrastructure. So in keeping with sound financial policies, the city is creating 3 new water utility reserve policies, and the first one is a water utility fund operating reserve. And this will provide cash flow to support the operation, maintenance, and administration of the city's water utility fund to cover any significant unanticipated or mandated expenditures. And this will also be set at 2 months of annual expenditures or 17%. I forgot to say on the other one, the other operating reserve and the emergency reserve, those are committed fund balances. And this one would also be a committed fund balance under the GASB categorization. And then we're going to also create a water utility capital reserve to cover any unexpected and unplanned infrastructure repairs and replacements not included in the capital improvement plan annual budget. And this will be set at annual average of CIP expenditures averaged over the next 5 years. And although the water rate study is only extended for, or the new rates were only extended for 3 years, we did have a 5-year annual CIP budget, and so it would be more prudent to set it at the annual average of the 5-year plan. And that would be a committed fund balance as well. And then finally, we'll be establishing a water utility fund rate stabilization reserve, and this will be used during periods of short-term revenue shortages, possibly due to economic recession, drought, or other causes, to help alleviate the need to quickly implement substantial rate increases. And this will be set at 10% of annual volumetric charge revenue, increasing by 1% every year until it reaches 15% of annual volumetric charge revenue. And again, this would be a committed fund balance. So staff is requesting approval of the financial reserve policy as outlined in Exhibit A to the resolution, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
I
Councilmember
guess
Agrimonti?
Yeah, I just have I gave you the booklet that the league, Kathy, it's all on finance. I went to it, I had to leave early, but it started in Monterey, I don't know, a year and a half ago. I went to this class, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., and it had nothing on reserves. It was crazy. Since I've been on this council, this is what I've been asking for, is let's take a look at the reserves. The policy, of course, it's been switched from revenues to expenditures, which I understand. But traditionally, councils have never really gone back. I mean, the numbers given to them, but I don't think there was a true understanding of what the reserves are for or why they are. And so I'm really happy that we finally gotten to this point. And I actually think the commitment in 2006 was to review them every year. And I mean, we've seen the numbers, but we've never, not we, but in the past, it's just been passed over.
Yeah, so I think, there's a variety of best practices that we've been working on with the council. And one of them is having an updated policy, number one, to within your budget document, to have a clear reserve document and numbers so you know where your reserves are. We've implemented that as well so that the council has that information. It's important as you look at what your unallocated reserves are, because that is an opportunity for you to determine, do you want to take some of that one-time money and make an investment or do something in your community? So reserves and how much you have reserves is a really important fiscal piece for a council. And you're right, Councilmember Agrimonti, and I looked at that piece with you as well, and there was nothing, one line.
Add special funds
Yeah,
and things like that.
so there's a lot of complexity in it, but, so reserve policy is one of kind of a core basic piece that cities need to have. this city has had a general fund reserve policy, but it's been dated and not up to date. On the water side, before we did the water study, there were no reserve policies for your water fund. That is something that we have corrected now through the water rate study, and you are formally now doing that as well. That's another really important financial management practice, to have clear reserve policies. Again, it's going to take us some time on the water side to build those reserves, but we know what our target is, we know where we're moving forward, and that's just being fiscally prudent. And really, so I want to commend the council. There's been a lot of hard work on the water. You spent a lot of time talking about those water policies. So I want to thank Sue for her work on this, and appreciate the council's support as we kind of polish up these areas.
Councilmember Hundley.
I have a question about the new water reserve, which it's kind of scary to think that it did not exist before now. But so these are our objectives, and I assume it's going to take us a while to get there. What is how long until like the operating reserve is going to be full? Do we know?
So, well, the operating reserve, actually, you can set it at, it'll be 2 months of annual expenditures. But our reserve right now, because we have a water capital account that we've been transferring money into for several years. And we do have a reserve fund balance in there. In the general fund, we have a very small reserve in there. So we need to take a look at, because we've been transferring money over to the water reserve, how much of that really, should be part of the combined fund balance. So,
and this was when we set the new water rates, this was a part of that, right? Knowing
Yes.
that we would have to put a tiny bit aside to do that.
right. And as we, the rates were, as they calculated the rates and the increase in rates, that was so we could accomplish these reserves.
Any other questions? There's no members of the public present, so we won't have public comment. And on to council discussion. I don't know, do we have a motion?
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. Could I make a motion? A resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma approving Sonoma Financial Reserve Policy.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Councilmember Agrimonti?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Item 6.5. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution authorizing the creation and addition of a senior management analyst position added to the fiscal year 1920 budget and direct the city manager to initiate the recruitment process. City manager.
All right, Mayor Harrington, members of the council. As council's aware very well, where we are a small lean machine here in Sonoma. There's about 38 full-time employees or full-time equivalents, and of those 38, about 10 are management positions. So when we talk, most of our staff time is focused on operations, work that we're already current services doing. And so when the council wants to do new initiatives, whether it's cannabis or new efforts on housing, there's research and administrative and analytical and project management work to do. And we require some additional staff resources to be able to really perform and get the work that council would like to have done. So a classification that is kind of a core classification in many cities is a management analyst or senior management analyst. So I'm recommending that you add this position, and the senior management analyst will work on a variety of research, special initiatives, project management. I do want to make, there is one typo on the resolution that I need to correct with you when you're ready to take that action, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? So is the management, in terms of the org chart, does the management analyst report to you, the city manager
Yes.
only?
Reports to the city manager.
Okay. And then, I guess it's fine. I'm just curious about the salary range. That's the typical salary range for a senior management analyst, because it's also very similar to some of our other senior staff here.
Yeah, so looking, I went out and we did a went and looked at our labor market agencies, and so this is comparable to a senior management analyst. It's and some of the other cities, there's about 5 other cities in Sonoma County that have this position. There were, I think, one was in 90,000, one was paying 103, one was paying 108. This caps out at 99. So in terms of the average, this hits the average, and then it sits within looking at some internal relationships.
Oh, the 135 is the total.
135 total compensation. That's a total compensation. The base salary ends up being 99,000.
Okay, thank you. There are no members of the public for public comments, so I'll bring it back to the council for comments or a motion. Councilmember Hundley.
Before you make a motion, can I make one correction? I had a typo on the resolution where it says creation of the senior management analyst position. It says approved Exhibit A. Exhibit A is correct, but the resolution is wrong. It should read the salary range monthly is $6,839 to $8,313 as a monthly. So the attachment is correct, but the information in the body of the resolution was wrong.
I would like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing creation and addition of a senior management analyst position, addition to the fiscal year 1920 budget, and direct the city manager to initiate the recruitment process as amended.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Absolutely.
Councilmember Agrimonti. Aye. Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Are there any council members who would like to make a report or comment?
Yes, I would.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
I was remiss in not reporting out from my February 20th meeting for the Waste Management Agency, and we spent our whole meeting in closed session because we were looking for a new executive director. So some things are still going on, and we haven't really made that decision. But a couple of things along with that, Ken Wells, who consults with different agencies, he brought to our attention that we are under the umbrella of AB 939. And he suggests that we take a look at SB 1383 regarding methane. And obviously that's supposed to be out of something that is done away with by 2024. That's my little report.
Thank you for the update. Councilmember, Vice Mayor Harvey, sorry.
Whatever. Let's go. I recently moved into a redevelopment area that's a former redevelopment agency, or is a redevelopment agency, and so I apparently have to disclose that to you all.
Interesting.
So here's my disclosure. Yeah, that's right. But don't say it. We don't have to talk about addresses publicly.
I think it's public information.
Yeah, maybe it is. Who cares? So there's a disclosure statement. I also gave this to our city manager, and so I just want to note that I've disclosed it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. City manager. Comments, announcements?
Nope, not at this point. Thank you.
And our city attorney has gone home sick, so I will adjourn the meeting.